purpose of the Pope is the opposite
well,
of that.
exactly right.
Which is why we kind of binned him off.
We'll find out. She's coming next. We'll see you later. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable tank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning to you. Alex Phillips is here with you in her... I thought I referred to myself in the third person then. That was slightly weird. This is Alex Phillips. That is I. With you until 1 o'clock today on this rather glorious-looking Friday. I hope it is sunny and cheerful where you are. And what a crazy week of news it has been. There's so much to catch up on, isn't there? And it's great to have your company to get through all of it. We're going to be talking about this historic UK-US trade deal. Woohoo! But before you crack out your bottles of English sparkling or pour yourself a double JD and Coke, perhaps we need to look at the detail, or perhaps we need to look at the lack of it. Is this a trade deal, or is it essentially Donald Trump providing last-minute redemption, having marched Sir Keir Starmer to the edge of the cliff with the threat of extreme tariffs? What's going to happen with tariffs on things like the film industry? What's going to happen with agriculture? What's going to happen with our services? I've got some fascinating stats for you on what this could mean. We're going to be chewing over that. And, of course, we're going to be talking about Father Bob. Father who, I hear you say? Well, Father Bob has now become the latest Pope, Pope Louis XIV, the first American to hold that title. Is he going to be a MAGA? Leo, sorry, Ted just reminded me. See, I haven't got my notes in front of me, and normally I just like a crutch. Leo the 14th, I did know that. I just, you know, my brain is all over the place this morning, having been trapped on the tube for the best part of an hour. Yeah, he has become the latest pontificate, and is he going to be a MAGA Pope? Well, someone's pulled out his voting records, and indeed, the man has always voted Republican, but he's had some pretty tasty spats online. I think he is the first pontiff with a social media footprint. So we kind of get an idea of what he may be all about. And World War II veterans are asking that Nigel Farage save Britain from losing its values. What does that mean? What can be done? We're also, of course, going to be talking about migrant housing costs, which essentially already rebuilding that black hole that Labour said they had to fill by doing things such as getting rid of the winter fuel allowance. So much to catch up on today. And I'm pleased to say that I'm going to be joined right now by James Price, former Conservative government advisor. Good morning, James.
Good morning. What a glorious morning it is.
Well, look, I feel like I've bumped down with a pretty dodgy landing this morning. It all started off with the tube, as all stories in London do, when you just sort of have one of those commutes in, which is, you know, the seventh circle of hell. And it scrambles your brain when you spent 45 minutes underneath somebody else's armpit. But never mind. Let's talk about Sir Keir Starmer, because, well, he's had a pretty interesting commute to the position he finds himself in with a UK-US trade deal. I'm going to I say the word trade with a particular emphasis because this isn't really a trade deal, is it? It's not even, you know, some sort of trade deal, an economic partnership agreement. It's more like an 11th hour reprieve after Donald Trump threatened to whack significant tariffs on the UK, which could have seen hemorrhaging thousands of jobs, particularly in the automotive sector. And yeah, a last minute reprieve, let's say, in that area, but we're still seeing tariffs on UK exports higher than they were 3 months ago. It's not exactly something to celebrate, is it?
Well, I'm in two minds on this, but perhaps because it's such a lovely sunny morning where I am, that I'll attempt to be optimistic about some of this. A lot of this stuff was worked out a long time ago, and no one really could have anticipated the scale of Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day of slapping huge, great tariffs and taking America from being a fairly free trading nation in some respects into probably the most protectionist advanced country in the world, really. So I think it's probably wrong for us to judge this deal that's just been announced between Britain and America with anything compared to before that March, quote, Liberation Day. Relative to other countries, it's really good for us. Or should we say it's still much worse for everybody else. That is still in a relative game of trade, and when just companies are making decisions about where to build things, where to ship things from, where supply chains need to be worked out, that's still a win for Britain. And Trump came out, I think, right away and said it, that it was Brexit that enabled this to happen. So I think relative, that's a good thing. I think in general, it's really good that we're seeing that we're getting trade deals done. This was a long vaunted Brexit bonus that people like you and I campaigned for both the American deal and the Indian deal. Now, as you say, there's not a lot of detail on it yet. Could it have gone further? Definitely. Would anybody have been better at negotiating this than people like Keir Starmer? Yeah, absolutely. I'll pick the guy walking past on the street. I'm sure he'd have done a better job of it. But the fact remains that I think this is good progress and hopefully will augur more and better trade deals, and the government getting out of the way of businesses and people's lives is almost always a good thing.
I mean, what I take from this, and I don't know if you've got the same interpretation, is that this is Donald Trump's attempt to say to the UK, look, you've got to be Atlanticist, not get yourself retrapped in the orbit of Brussels. Keir Starmer saying, well, we can do both. But Donald Trump very much making the point that this is because of Brexit, like you're saying. But the thing is, Sir Keir Starmer wasn't even really in the room when the trade negotiators created this decision. He was at an Arsenal match, had no idea it was going to be announced. He was watching Arsenal PSG and was rudely interrupted, and then find himself, you know, having to hastily organise a press conference at Jaguar Land Rover and be patched through to the Oval Office by telephone. If anything, it makes the guy look like he's just being pushed about by Trump.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Maybe it was all a last-minute genius idea that somebody had because yesterday was VE Day and the best demonstration of what happens when Britain and America stand shoulder to shoulder and how world-beating we can be when we work together. You know, maybe it would have been nice of someone to have thought of that well ahead of time. But as we've seen in the Trump administration in general, it's pretty, what's the old the tech company phrase, move fast and break things. You know, they are moving at a rate of knots in America, and it's all going to look a bit slapdash, but that's sort of the President Trump style, isn't it? Nevertheless, I think that we shouldn't let Starmer take too much credit, as you say. And a lot of this stuff was worked out many years ago under the first Trump administration. And it was only then Biden coming in and COVID getting in the way and all of these other horrible things that have happened to the world economy over the last few years that prevented this from happening. I think that it's going to be fine for us to quibble about details of it, especially with the India deal, and there are some problems, I think, in there. But by and large, I think this is a good move that we should welcome, and we should welcome, as you say, exactly right, Alex, more and more ties with the United States, which we'll notice, by the way, we're able to have trade deals and economic partnerships there without allowing for complete free trade of people, without allowing for a foreign court to have a bigger say and tell us what to do. That's the kind of deals that we should be striking with other countries. That's the kind of deals that European nations should be having with each other. Great to have a free single market and a breakdown of trade barriers. That's what Margaret Thatcher helped to order inside Europe. But you can do all of that without having a bunch of unelected freaks that you will know from serving in that parliament telling us how we can sell our cabbages.
Well, no, exactly. And actually, all those people who screeched about chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef, I mean, guess what? They're not on the menu. Yes, there has to be a bigger agricultural deal done, and farmers are waking up this morning, particularly beef farmers, and wondering what this may mean for them. But actually, not a bad thing that British beef is back on the menu, because after BSE, we weren't allowed even a single steak to enter the American territories. So potentially a bit of an opportunity there. Let's talk now about VE Day, which of course was yesterday, and Nigel Farage organised an event with 3 100-year-old World War II veterans, part of the surviving cohort of those who actually lived through that war, a diminishing number of people today. And Nigel Farage basically saying that perhaps people like these veterans support me because of our values. Because actually there's been an erosion of patriotism due to the influx of immigration. Many of those who have come in the last 20 years do not share our values, and we've become a little bit less British every day. Poignant words, I think, and I think probably a lot, encapsulating a lot of what the sentiment is behind Reform's recent surge in success.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. A couple of thoughts on this, that what VE Day and what the struggle against Nazism has done has been pretty transformative for our society and culture, not just in Britain, but around the world as well. It was such a complete victory of our ways of life and our values and our institutions, especially once the Cold War was also won, that all the kind of international institutions around the world, the United Nations and NATO and the World Trade Order, all of these sorts of things, they all very much adopted a kind of Anglo-American sets of values. And that is such a massive victory, and with a lot of Christian values in there as well. Definitely we should say that too. That our victory was so complete that I think people forgot the kind of special mixture of Christian ethics and English common law and a kind of empiricist sense and mercantile interest and sense of fair play and all these very deep things, which, by the way, go deeper than just queuing and going, oh, isn't the weather bad today? Only that sort of twee nonsense. All those sorts of ideas, which were particularly British and then got transported across the Atlantic, that enabled us to win that war, we've sort of forgotten and think we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we're seeing the sad corrosive effects of us not respecting those deep ancient traditions and customs. And that's something that Farage obviously taps into very, very effectively, which is why his popularity is so high despite efforts from some people to attack him.
But there is a sense, isn't there? I mean, looking at this other headline, that the costs of migrant accommodation has wiped out savings the government would gain or would have gained from cuts to winter fuel payments. It does, at the end of the day, boil down to why on earth are we rolling out the red carpet, housing, feeding, accommodating, bowing down, bending, scraping and kowtowing to men from countries which have nothing to do with this nation. Their ancestors did not build this land. Their predecessors' taxes didn't fund the development of the Great Britain. They don't share our culture. They don't share our religion. Frankly, a lot of them don't even like us or what we stand for. And yet they are being housed and fed and looked after and beatified, while people who actually did do the hard graft of forging this great nation are just being abandoned. Left, swept under the carpet.
Yeah, I don't think I could put it any better than that. You're completely right. And I think that it is all the things that made Britain great that we just talked about, and the effort that we put in that war and all the time since, has been sort of slightly misplaced in thinking that we have to then let the rest of the world in as well, and we've forgotten all the good that we've done in the world and only highlight the bad. And it's this sort of a cross of radical misplaced empathy and a sort of enforced guilt about, nebulous empire and slavery, not of course teaching that we were the first nation in the history of the world that abolished slavery, and the Royal Navy spent 50 years and lots of blood and treasure abolishing such an abhorrent practice before anybody or any religious text even ever said that it was perhaps a bad thing. And we should therefore, the lesson I think from V-Day is to not be so hard on ourselves and not to throw away, exactly as you say, this wonderful nation that we've built as a very core small c conservative principle. And everybody who's listening to this will resonate with this idea that things are very hard to build and to maintain and very easy to destroy. And I'm afraid that we are, as you say, Alex, in the process of throwing away and destroying what has been built with gay abandon, and we're not going to like the results when it's done.
I mean, this is the thing. I've always described the mass influx of migrants from far-flung countries, particularly Muslim countries, as a form of cultural vandalism. But talking about that, now, when we saw that we've got the first American Pope, I thought to myself, well, the spirit goes where the spirit is needed, and perhaps this is going to see a brilliant resurgence of Christianity, or the West leading again when it comes to Judeo-Christian values. But what we do know about Pope Leo XIV is when it comes to his attitudes towards America's migrant crisis and the Trumpian policies on defending American borders, he seems to be at odds with the president, and he seems to sort of go down a sort of carefully trodden middle route of, yes, the country has its rights to protect its borders, but at the same time it is the responsibility of rich nations to accommodate those people who want to seek a better life from troubled nations. Unfortunately, I tend to disagree with him. I think, why is it our responsibility? What do you make of this appointment of the latest pontiff?
Well, I'm not a Roman Catholic, and therefore I think that the old line that the Bishop of Rome shall have no jurisdiction in this realm of England is a nice one, because I don't have to believe that this chap is infallible when he talks about things with which I vehemently disagree with him. It is, as we said here on this show before, the values that have built the world are Christian values, and they're the only ones that have managed to make a tolerant, forgiving, humane, gracious society. But I do think that when you are someone who spent all of his life in, I think a lot of it in Peru, became a Peruvian citizen as well, and that just still is a society that has been influenced by those kinds of Christian teachings, you look around and you think, well, these guys could, be all right here in Chicago, where the new Pope is actually from, and America has been a melting pot, hasn't it, and all that, and that's fine. But America has had the confidence to instill its own culture and virtues and values and customs onto people who've arrived, and the people who've arrived tended to be from Europe or from Central and South America, who tend to also have broadly Christian values, and therefore it's no surprise that a priest would think that everybody could rub along. The problem that we've got in Europe in particular, America is starting to find it now, but we've really got it here in Britain and in France and in Germany in particular, as you say, Alex, is that people from a very, very alien culture have been rocking up here. And it's not just that they're going to magically start going, oh yeah, you know what, the common law and looking after women and respecting gay people's right to exist, and that, Jews don't secretly run the world, and all these sorts of terrible backward ideas that they've had in the past, are they going to suddenly jettison them the second that they get here? Probably not going to work like that. And on all current evidence, it doesn't seem like it is. Lots of surveys of people who've even been here for quite a while find it quite hard to shake quite dodgy customs and beliefs that they have. You ask certain people from certain cultures what they think about women, what they think about gay people. You see the late rates of cousin marriage and some of these things. You see, even if they did manage to shake this stuff off, by the way, where are we going to house these people? And the fact that it's almost all men coming over means you've got a demographic problem going on as well there. And these are all problems that His Holiness the Pope is not having to deal with, because he's got very secure borders orders in the Vatican, not like the rest of us.
Well, also, perhaps His Holiness the Pope should be worried about the future of Christendom and basically allowing the Trojan horse of its enemies to take root. Talking about that, finally, let's talk about Lucy Powell, because, you know, I'm glad, actually, that woman has come under a barrage of attack after belittling rape survivors by grooming gangs, but by suggesting it's a dog whistle issue. Frankly, people on the left wing of politics have gone away for far too long with bullying, censoring, intimidating and sneering at those people who stuck their head above the parapet and realised there is a problem in this country and took the risk of standing up and saying something about it. In theory, by now, we should have all learnt that lesson. She hasn't, has she?
No, you're right. First things first, she should absolutely be sacked. I mean, I think what she said was completely disgraceful. This idea that you go on to this wasn't a cover of breath or anything. She was on a television program or a radio program and therefore, had time to prepare what she was going to say about this. This was really what she thought. And she's really so cloistered, this long-time Labour socialist MP, that she thinks that it is just a dog whistle to have a problem with Pakistani Muslim rape gangs going around raping and drugging children. And as if, it's so uncouth. Must we really talk about this? Couldn't you pass me the potatoes at this fancy dinner party instead? Do we really have to talk about such things? I'd much rather talk about redistributing money to people or increasing regulations on people so they can't live the lives they want to live, or whatever it is socialists talk about at their dinner parties. This is what she really believes. She sneers at people. She thinks that if you care about really fundamental issues like this, then you're some kind of knuckle-dragging racist moron. I think I know who the real moron is. I think I do too. Absolute disgrace. I think she should be sacked. I think that there's no spine in the Labour government that they've allowed. I mean, the fact that this idiot who wore a Never Kissed a Tory T-shirt, I mean, that says it all. She doesn't merit a seat on those green benches. James Price, thank you ever so much. Always wonderful. Catching up with James. Right, we're going to take a short break. Now, if you want to throw your 2 bits into the ring, then it's 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call, charged at your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send me a text message. If you do, remember to write the word talk before your text. That way it pings off the sides of all the various Starlinks that are now cluttering up the stratosphere, narrowly avoids the International Space Station where no one does anything apart from float around playing guitars and frankly wasting our time and money. And finally we'll make it the 285 miles from the International Space Station down to the areas on top of Talk Towers and into the makeshift Cape Canaveral I have in front of me, whereby I can read your messages on the computer screens. OK, I'm glad you understood that description. Short break now. I'm back after this.
quite a staggering result for reform. I think bigger than even they were expecting. And it's going to have a few reverberations, isn't it? And we've already seen Keir Starmer this week coming out with all manner of sort of what you might have called right-wing policies about migrants, you know, saying that you're all going to have to speak English now when you come here, which if the Tories had said that a couple of years ago, they'd have been denounced as Nazis and fascists. You know,
No, that's not true.
Yeah, they would. Of course they would.
All governments have said that, and they always...
Yeah, but the Labour government have never said it. The Labour government have never said it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show, and welcome to Rome, to the Vatican. Pope Leo the 14th. I don't know where you were yesterday. I was sitting in Wetherspoons having my gammon and eggs, I was. Watching the news in the distance, and suddenly the smoke changed from grey to white, and I was like, wow, this is it. That's quick, isn't it? Sometimes they take 2 weeks deliberating on who should be the next pontiff. And so I was gripped watching all of the pomp and ceremony on the screen and waiting for that moment, who was going to emerge on the balcony. And I must admit, part of me thought it was going to be the world's first black pope. I thought Cardinal Sarah or Cardinal Tuxen might be getting it. But then he appeared, didn't he? The figure of Robert Francis Prevost, Father Bob as he was known, the first American pope who is going to go by the honorific of Pope Leo the 14th. What does this mean for the Catholic Church? What might it mean for the world at large? Because it's interesting, you've got to remember that the Pope is, for many people out there, adherents of Christianity, of the Catholic tradition, is the primary figure, the foremost figure, and has indeed, some might argue, a political role to play. So what does this mean? The fact that he is an American, and the fact that he has had some pretty public disagreements, let's say, or he's let his opinions be known on the current Trump regime's policies. Let's speak to Caroline Farrow, who's a Catholic journalist and commentator. Caroline, great to have you on the programme. It was very exciting yesterday when we saw the new Pope emerge on the balcony, but was he who you expected?
No, he wasn't actually. But then I always said all along, trying to predict who the Pope's going to be is a mug's game. So we have a list of Papal, which is sort of like the main contenders, runners, the people who we think are the main candidates. And he had been profiled as a potential candidate, but he wasn't really among the front runners. So it was a huge shock. And of course, the fact that he's American. The thinking had been that because America is such a superpower, that it was very unlikely that there was going to be an American Pope. And I have to say, I was really shocked because I was having to give a down-the-line reaction to another news channel. And I was trying to listen to what was being said in Latin and watch the pictures. And the minute they said, Robert, I was thinking, oh, no, it can't possibly be Cardinal Sarah, because that's, Cardinal Sarah's first name, which we thought was very unlikely because he was a very conservative candidate. And they announced who it was, and I was sort of shocked. I thought, goodness, wow, an American, but also pleased at the same time. And I was pleased for a number of reasons, actually. Firstly, because he was wearing if you notice, he was wearing the red cape with the detailed gold embroidery on it. And that cape is called a mozzetta. And it symbolises authority and the touch of the episcopal rank within the church, and normally sort of various high-ranking clergy wear it because it sort of denotes their position and the occasion. Now, famously, when the previous pope stepped out on the balcony, he was all in his white cassock, and he eschewed the Messetta. He said, "No, I'm not going to go with any of the trappings of the traditional trappings of the papacy. I'm going to be very humble and plain and not have any extravagance." And this sort of symbolised Pope Francis's approach to liturgical matters. He didn't want any traditionalism. He wanted everything modern, very pared down. And of course, within the Catholic Church, there's a huge traditionalist faction who are very attached to the Latin Mass and like the symbolism of these garments. These garments aren't just about a sort of fashion show. They do have very deep symbolic meaning. So the fact that Pope Leo XIV, as we now know him as, stepped out on the balcony wearing these traditional garments was very healing. You know, it seems to be a nod to tradition that okay, I'm going to try and unite the two factions within the church. So over the last few years, there's been a very sort of a liberalising faction and a very traditional faction, and he looks as if he's giving a signal, I think, that he wants to bring healing to both camps. So that.
How much is his appointment? How much is the fact that he is an American and the first American pope? How much do you think that factored into the decision within conclave? Because, you know, I'm a Church of England Christian, so I don't sort of follow the goings on of Catholicism particularly closely. But the Pope does have a political footprint, doesn't he? He is a sort of geopolitical figure. And do you think that conclave sat there and looked at this man and thought, actually, this is quite important? You know, if there's one nation we need to bring back into the fold to lead the way morally in the world, it is America.
Who knows? I mean, obviously we'll never know for sure what was on the conclave's mind, because they are, of course, sworn to secrecy. I think actually the fact that he was American would have, and that he seemed to be, he's not a MAGA Pope, right? And the fact that this would have already been known, I think that would have worked in his favour. So they would have thought, this is a good, and of course I'm assuming, I don't know what the cardinals were thinking, but they would have thought this is a good foil for Donald Trump. We aren't going to get a MAGA Pope. But the fact that he was elected very quickly, or relatively quickly, I think shows that he also had managed to garner support from the Conservative faction as well. So I think he was very much seen as a good compromise continuity candidate, somebody who wasn't going to be exactly the same as the previous Pope, but also not someone who was going to be radically different and parrot for want of
no one that's going to upset the apple cart, so to speak. Caroline Farrow, a Catholic journalist and commentator, thank you ever so much for that brilliant analysis of the new Pope, Pope Meghan the 14th. Nope, I mean Pope Leo XIV. I'm only joking with you there. Right, we're going to take a break. Before we do, let me tell you about your chance to win a weekend away in Munich. That is right, at the end of this month, to watch the biggest game in European football. That's right, the Champions League final. We're also going to be sticking $5,000 in your pocket to spend on, I don't know, in the beer kellens and whatnot. If you are the lucky winner, you can find out how to do that right now.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5,000 in your hand.
How about that?
Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
Blooming Dominic, imagine that. You get to go to the Champions League final and with £5 to spend on. I can't imagine what else there is to spend on in Germany other than bratwurst and beer. We'll probably come back with a cardiac event. Anyway, good luck if you are entering that competition. Right, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be speaking to a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations on this UK-US trade breakthrough. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well done, Keir. Well done, mate. Well done, son. Yeah, historic trade deal with America. We're so proud of you. Always looking out for British interests. You never have to be pushed or shoved into anything. You've always believed in Brexit and our autonomy as a great seafaring trading nation able to stand on its own 2 feet. In no way, shape or form will you march to the edge of a cliff with a gun to your head in order to get this agreement in place. And of course, you were there for the lot of it, weren't you? That's right. You weren't at the Arsenal Paris Saint-Germain match, standing there as a, ardent fan as you are, and your all expenses paid for box when the call came through that finally we weren't about to hemorrhage thousands of jobs in the automotive sector because people over in Washington, D.C. have been given a last-minute reprieve by the Trump administration. That's right. You were then summoned to Jaguar Land Rover because your team organised a hastily put-together press conference from their factories to announce the fact that, guess what, you guys? You aren't going to be marched to the job centre anytime soon. That's right. You can still be employed because the tariffs on UK vehicles to America, well, they're still going to go up, but it's not going to be apocalyptic as they were before. That's right, wasn't it? You were so not caught off guard that you were there present to sort of paw at the president like you did last time you were invited to the White House. No, you had to be patched through via speakerphone. But hey, historic win for you, Sir Keir. You've got our backs. Let's speak to Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administration. Steve, great to have you on the programme. Now,
hey, Alex, good to be with you.
Trump is sort of saying this is a brilliant historic trade deal. I mean, it's not really a trade deal. It's more like a last-minute concession, so we're not sort of, down proverbial fecal matter creek without a paddle.
Well, and both sides are claiming a win, which I guess is always good in negotiations if it's a win-win. There was not a huge trade disparity at the beginning. There's not a huge trade disparity now. Some of the things that are done are kind of nibbling around the edges. But again, we'll still be able to buy Bentleys and Jaguars in the U.S. without a big high tariff. And the digital services tax that imposes a tax on U.S. AI and high-tech companies remains in place. The tariff of 10% on a lot of British goods remains in place. One of the complaints that Trump had was that the value-added tax of 20% is a burden on U.S. goods. It remains in place. So again, it repairs the apparent rift, but I'm not sure it really does much. And I don't think it does much to cure the British economy. And Keir's going to have to pay a price for that at some point politically.
I mean, why do you think that Trump has singled out Britain for his first concessions? Because I don't see this so much, like you said, it's not really a big comprehensive trade deal. It's more like a rowing back on punitive tariffs that would otherwise have been meted out against the UK. Far less punitive, of course, than being threatened to the EU, who are digging their heels in and talking about retaliatory tariffs. Do you think Trump has essentially used Britain, because we are a significant trading partner? The US is the UK's largest goods export partner, almost £60 billion worth in exports and 126 billion in services last year alone. So, you know, there was something to be starting with there. And of course, since Brexit, we can actually have our own trading relationships. Do you think he is essentially using the UK as a bit of a pawn to sort of get back at the EU, to demonstrate, look, we're going to do a deal with Britain, we're not going to do the same with you, and to sort of, you know, play piggy in the middle with us a little bit?
I think everything with Trump is transactional. And part of this was, in fact, to send a message and to I think also make it clear that the relationship between the British people and the U.S. people was never at risk. This was a business rift, and there was never any risk that the significant relationship between the two countries was at risk. But I do think the EU is going to have to come to the table and bend the knee at some point, because they do have a more significant trade imbalance. There are more significant tariff and non-tariff barriers to U.S. products and goods and services in the EU. And I think, again, Trump wanted an early win, and I think there's going to be some significant tariff agreements, trade agreements following in the next week or so with places like India and others that will be much more significant and which will help put things on a more fair basis in terms of trade imbalance.
I mean, I get the impression that the UK, poor little us, are rather being collateral damage. That we've got sort of punished by proxy because we never had a trade deficit with America. In fact, it's kind of like more in America's favour than in our favour, despite having been locked in the EU trading bloc, the customs union, for so long. And we're in a worse position now than we were 3 months ago. Even still, we still don't know about things such as tariffs on the film industry. And of course, because we share a common language, when Trump announced that he was going to stick tariffs up against foreign film production to try and attract talent and filming back to the US, I suppose the country who's sort of most at risk of that having an impact is Britain, who has made huge amounts of investments in the film industry. We don't really know about farming and agriculture yet. We also don't really know about what the position on our relationship with China is going to be, or pharmaceuticals. Do you think we now have the stage set to start working towards a comprehensive trade deal?
I hope so. And the devil is always in the details. And as you point out, we don't know a lot of the details exactly of how agricultural products and others are going to be affected. I do think that China is still the big factor here. I mean, with the U.S., we have about a $500 billion to $1 trillion trade deficit with China. China does a lot more than just the trade imbalance. They block U.S. investment in China. They block U.S. companies from owning real estate in China. The same is not true when Chinese companies want to own companies in the U.S. or own real estate in the U.S. And the big problem with China is, and it's true with the China-British relationship as well, is they cheat, they steal. Intellectual property is not protected. If you make a product, you're going to find it on the shelves pretty quickly at a very lower price in your country, because they're going to take that technology, take that innovation, copy it, and then sell it to you for a cheaper price. So intellectual property protection is a problem for us with China, and it's a problem for Britain and China as well.
The problem that we've got, of course, is we are so tightly bound now by a Gordian knot to Beijing due to successive governments, and this government has been especially keen on running over to Beijing at every single opportunity. I don't know if Donald Trump hasn't noticed that it's very hard to extract ourselves from the auspices of whatever China wants. They're sort of embedded within our critical infrastructure. What do you think Trump's next steps are going to be when it comes to this sort of ongoing tariff? What do you call it? I mean, it's it's like a drama, isn't it? I mean, what is his sort of long-term plan, do you suppose?
You know, I think it's mixed. I think in part he wants to create more investment in the U.S., bring companies that have fled the U.S. for cheaper climes to bring a lot of those home. And there's about $8 trillion to $10 trillion in investment that's been announced to create more jobs in the U.S. That's going to happen. But at the same time, we're not going to bring back the shoe manufacturing and the T-shirt manufacturing. We simply can't make those products at a cheap enough price. So we're going to continue to get those from Malaysia, from Vietnam, from other third world countries. So I don't know that that's going to be the real significant change. But agriculture products, I think, are a significant issue. For example, the dispute with Canada, they're charging 200, 300% tariffs on dairy products and beef products. They charge a 25% tariff on orange juice and oranges. Not that they're trying to, I guess, protect the Vancouver and Alberta orange groves. So there are disparities there that I think from an agriculture standpoint are problematic. India doesn't buy a lot of American rice. Asian countries don't buy a lot of our cotton and our soybeans that are blocked out of their market. So I think the agriculture issues will be the next big round for dispute across the globe.
I think you're probably right, Steve. And look, if you happen to have any connections into the Trump administration, perhaps you could whisper in their ears that I know you guys have all heard of Aberdeen Angus steak and you know our beef's pretty good, but perhaps you ought to try our Welsh lamb. It is probably the best in the world. Right, thank you very much, Steve Gill, former advisor to Clinton and Bush. Right, now we're going to take a short break. When we come back, organised crime gangs in prisons are keeping up at night the prison minister. What on earth is going on inside Clink? There's Muslim gangs, there's big bosses managing to corral not only the inmates but also the prison officers into doing their dastardly bidding. We're going to be talking about all of that with the one and only incredible, inimitable Mr. Peter Bleksley after this.
This is not a trade deal, it is an alleviation of some of the tariffs, especially on steel and cars.
Yeah.
So steel and cars are back down to 10%, and steel and aluminium's on 0.
Right.
Everything else is still paying those extra tariffs.
And also,
so
this
isn't a deal.
Much
it's
to be discussed,
relief.
isn't it? Like the pharmaceutical stuff is still to be discussed.
Yeah.
Lots of other things still to be discussed.
Yeah, and we're worse off because we're having to take... So there's a manufactured crisis here by Trump. Long-term tactics aside, this is a manufactured crisis for which we've got a partial exemption, and we've given the Americans some stuff in return.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and look who is in the studio, Mr. Peter Blexley. It's been ages since I've seen you.
It has. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and there's no one better to join me in the studio. Honestly, I've missed you.
You're very kind. I've missed you too.
Oh, bless. Now, after our loving, let's talk about other lovings that might be taking place inside prisons, and these are lovings potentially between big drugs barons and organised crime bosses who are essentially operating within Britain's jails by, I don't know, getting prison officers to do their bidding as well as inmates. Apparently Lord Timpson, who is the prison czar, has said that very, very wealthy crime bosses were corrupting staff to bring in drugs, flying them in with high-tech drones and profiting from bored inmates in overcrowded jails.
Yeah, well, our entire criminal justice system is in a catastrophic state, if I might say so. From the front line, which is policing, then to the CPS, underfunded, underperforming. Then we get to the courts, of course, leaking roofs, crumbling buildings, useless IT and a massive backlog. Get to the prisons, which we're focusing on this morning, and then after that, probation. It's all a mess. The whole thing is a mess. And consequently, I think public trust is being eroded hugely in our criminal justice system, which was something that we all looked up to, that we had great trust in, and that we exported around the world. Well, you wouldn't be exporting our criminal justice system these days. Lord Timpson, as you quite rightly point out, the prisons czar, has said that the atmosphere in so many prisons is toxic because of the influence of serious and organised crime. Well, hello! Any keen observer of crime and policing would have been able to tell you that. It's in a dreadful situation. Drugs are so popular, not only because they relieve the boredom and feed many a prisoner's addiction, but of course they're worth 3, 4, 5 times what they are in prison than they are out on the streets. They're a valuable commodity.
So what happens then? I mean, if you're, I don't know anything about the drugs industry, of course I don't, but if you're a, sort of drug dealer and you're flying drugs into prison, who's giving you the money? Where's the money coming from? Where's the profit?
The debts have to be settled outside of the prison walls, and communications are made often by phones, which prisoners shouldn't have, to people out on the outside. So if you are unfortunate enough to have a loved one incarcerated in prison, and that said loved one is enjoying illegal drugs whilst they are locked up, then in all likelihood you will be having to meet a drug dealer on the outside and pay that prisoner's debt, because if you don't, very unpleasant things will happen to your loved one while they're banged up. And of course, because they're so valuable, people on the outside with those loved ones are sometimes really struggling to get the money together to pay this inside prison debt. And there you go, the erosion, the corruption, the corrosive nature of the illegal drugs industry in its prohibited world just gets worse.
And we found out the other day as well, didn't we, that there is I think we knew this all along, that the prisons are rife with Muslim gangs and people forcing conversions, and essentially it seems to me that the radicals rule the roost.
Oh yes, and the separation units, which were first kind of designed by a very capable man called Ian Aitchison, a former prison governor. He said, create these separation units so that all the Islamist, murderous, fundamentalist people that want to wipe you, me and everybody listening or watching from the face of the earth get separated into these units so they cannot spread their poison in jail. All well and good in practice, in theory. In practice, what has happened is that these separation units have become a land of cooking facilities and recreation for the said Islamists, who are still able to spread their bile, their poison, and actually force people into converting to their version of Islam or else.
It's really worrying. I mean, I don't understand what's going on in our prisons. I keep seeing stories time and again of female prison officers having affairs with inmates as well. I mean, why on earth are we putting women who look like they'd rather be on OnlyFans than doing a day job in a prison with male convicts?
Some of whom were on OnlyFans.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's a very good question. The problem is, I'm going to mention the D word, OK? And the D word is regarded as a dirty word in so much of our society today. That word is discipline. We have ill-disciplined prison officers. Not all, of course. Some of them are wonderful. But we have ill-disciplined prison officers. We have some of them sleeping with prisoners, some of them smuggling contraband, including drugs, into prisons, and it's an escalating problem. A specialist police unit has had to be set up to investigate corruption in our prisons, and the number of convictions and dismissals for gross misconduct has doubled in a decade.
That's absolutely insane. I just don't understand how we have a situation where prisons essentially look like giant sort of illicit playgrounds. Let's talk now about poor little Jamie Bolger and his killers, because my understanding is that John Venable's up for parole.
Yes, it was reported this week that he is likely to get yet another parole hearing. So when we're talking about John Venables, let me just remind your audience of his catalogue of offending. Of course, we know he was convicted. He was 10 years old when he and an accomplice brutally murdered 2-year-old Jamie Bolger. He served in prison until he was 18, whereupon he was released. An apparently rehabilitated soul. It wasn't very long before he was nicked for a fray. In other words, a punch-up, and he was given a slap on the wrist. Not long after that, he got arrested for possession of cocaine, and he still wasn't recalled to prison. Only some years later, when he was arrested with 57 indecent images of children, in other words, he's a paedophile, and he obtained those images by going online and posing as a 35-year-old woman who had abused her own child. That's the level of duplicity and deception and dishonesty and deceit that he applied. Recalled to prison, foolishly released again, and his last misdemeanour in the outside world was possession of 1,000 indecent images of children. We are talking about a serial, murderous paedophile, and people want to give him a parole hearing. They need their heads tested.
But the other one's out, isn't he? The other one has started a new life under a newly assigned moniker.
Yes.
And one assumes is fully rehabilitated.
We've heard nothing of him for many, many years. So from that, we can safely work on the theory that he was rehabilitated. He has probably rebuilt his life and clearly has not offended again. So in that regards, he's a success story for the criminal justice system.
Now let's talk about a crime, a niche crime, if you will, the cutting down of the famous Sycamore Gap tree, because 2 men have now been found guilty of cutting down that tree, which stood for more than 150 years. They were convicted of causing £620,000 worth of damage to the tree. I don't know how you value damage to a tree by cutting it down. £1,000 worth of damage to Hadrian's Wall. I mean, why did they do it? I don't get... It's so weird to me that these two people sort of grandstanded and sort of boasted to each other about, ha, let's go cut down this famous tree.
Mindless sacrilege. Absolutely despicable crime to cut down such a thing of beauty, famed around the world on postcards and other images and the such like. Wanton vandalism. And while we're talking about that, I would like to give credit to those police officers and detectives that, number one, secured the scene so that they could gather whatever forensic evidence they could, and then secondly, carried out an investigation that was far from straightforward. And I'm sure many members of the public might have said to themselves, they'll never catch anybody for this, but they did. And of course, I'm a stern critic of the police, and it is only right and proper that I, when it is deserving, give credit to them for this.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, just absolute mindless act of criminal damage for the thrill of it seems, to be able to brag at having done it. I mean, why bother? Peter Blexley, thank you ever so much. Always wonderful catching up with you. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Paul Embry, trade unionist and writer, about all of the news and the views swimming around today. It's a pretty packed schedule. If you want to comment on anything we've been talking about, the number to call is 0344 499 1000. You can also use that to send a WhatsApp 87222 on the text. Put talk before your message. I'm back just after this.
This is Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said...
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. Yeah. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. This is Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock today, talking through all the big news stories of the week, and indeed getting all of your views on the news. Someone's message saying, Alex, Lucy Powell should absolutely be sacked. Horrific statements, and they always shriek Islamophobia when the obvious fact is stated that it is a cultural issue from one community, mainly to try and deflect from criticising a demographic they see as one of their voter bases. You're right. I mean, I cannot tell you how worried I am about this push to enshrine the concept of Islamophobia in statute. And we all know where this push is coming from. This push is coming from community leaders, and the weak-willed, lily-livered Labour Party are likely going to single out special protections for one religion, the one, frankly, that we have concerns about. And not concerns because we're xenophobic monsters or we're Islamophobes. Let's drill down into the word Islamophobe, shall we? A phobia A phobia is an irrational fear. I don't see there's anything irrational at looking at terrorist attacks and rape gangs and saying, there clearly is a subset of people who are adherents to this religion. And yes, not everybody, we know, clearly we know, otherwise we'd be in a whole world of pain, wouldn't we? But there's clearly a subset of people who are adherents to that religion, who are murderous, who are vile, who are perverted, who wish us harm, who regard our little girls as chattel, as sex slaves, and who, frankly, despise this country, want to take over this country, and it is there. It is that particular area of concerns that this government wants to turn around and say, you can't say it, you can't think it, you can't critique it, shut up and be gaslit instead. Well, I'm sorry. If they decide to put in place that particular legislation, and believe you me, it is in train. A man has now been charged with burning a Quran. If I own a book and I wish to set it on fire, it's my book. Shouldn't matter what it is. You look at all the things people say and do against Christianity. You know, all the memes going around of the new Pope. I've seen everything from Snoop Dogg lighting a spliff in conclave to Rihanna dressed up, barely dressed up. Hardly a term that particularly describes her comportment, but, you know, imitating a pope in some sort of sexy outfit. Yeah, we just get on with it, don't we? Because that's what freedom is all about, and agency, and moral agency. And yet I do worry about this government working in league with, you know, step by step with people who actually do will us harm. So I had to just get that off my chest. That message rather inspired me. Anyway, let's move on to other stories now with Paul Embry, trade unionist and writer. Paul, it's fantastic to have you on the programme. Let's talk, first of all, about this historic trade deal with America. Yay! It's brilliant. We're not going to be thrown over the cliff by America. They've decided to row back on some of the more punitive tariffs they were going to place against British exports. Well, that's because potentially we never had a trade deficit with America in the first place. Now, the Conservatives have come out basically saying that, you know, Keir Starmer's a mug and this is a terrible deal. I think that might be going a bit too far. At least we're not being punished as badly as, say, the EU. But it's, you know, it's hardly, there's not much for Sir Keir Starmer to grandstand about, is there?
Well, hi, Alex. I mean, first of all, it's not a comprehensive trade deal in the true sense of the term. It's essentially a tariff deal. And I don't think, I haven't read the entire text of it, but I've seen the headlines and read the main parts of it. And it's clearly a better position than we were in as a country, you know, 48 hours or more ago, but not perhaps as good a position as we were in 5 weeks ago or whatever it was when the tariffs were introduced. So I think the people who are saying this is some kind of wonderful historic deal are overplaying it. But by the same token, I think the people who are saying this is a terrible deal and we've been shafted and all the rest of it are probably underplaying it. I think the reality is somewhere in between the two. It's nothing particularly to write home about. I mean, you know, deals of this kind, I think, are generally a good thing, provided that they're not lopsided. It's important, I think, that the US decided to reduce the tariffs on cars and steel and aluminium, because I think there were a lot of people in this country, particularly in the steel industry, who were acutely concerned about the impact of those tariffs, and almost certainly it would have led to job losses. So not great, but not terrible, I think, is the honest appraisal of it.
Yeah, I would sort of sum it up as we're just now less screwed than everybody else. Let's talk now about World War II veterans who have been saying to Nigel Farage that, you know, we put our faith in you to save Britain from losing its values. I've never seen such a change politically as we are living through right now. I'm surprised, actually, more isn't being made of it, given that the latest polling had, I think, Reform UK on something like 29%. This was a YouGov poll. The Labour Party on 21%. 8 points points clear of the government and the Conservative Party languishing in the teens. This isn't just a nascent political revolution that's going to change the two-party system we have, but seemingly hurtling towards a one-party state. And I think this is at the very crux of it. This societal sense, with the rate of inward migration, with the sort of lambasting of everything that we once held dear and true as being racist, as being backwards, as being somehow wrong or a little bit dirty or shameful, and being replaced by all these sort of neo-ideologies from America, mass migration. This is at the heart of what we're seeing take place now, isn't it? How come the other two political parties can't seem to respond to this?
I think there's a lack of intellectual self-confidence on the part of the other parties. I think they're fixated on continuing with the status quo, the kind of hyper-liberal, globalist, if you like, technocratic status quo, which has dominated in this country for years, and which I think millions of people, mainstream voters, particularly working-class voters who feel completely left behind by globalization and the impacts of mass immigration and so on, they resist that, and they're growing sick and tired of it, and they look at the two main parties, and neither of them are particularly willing to break with it, despite the fact that they occasionally make the right noises. So I tend to agree with you. I don't think this is a flash in the pan from reform. I mean, I think that, as someone once said, the tectonic plates in British politics probably are shifting. And the really interesting thing at the moment is reform seem to be taking votes from Labour and the Tories in equal measure. I think once upon a time, people would have assumed they would take more votes from the Tories, you know, if you like, the Blue Rinse Brigade in the Tory shires. But actually, when you look at the results last week, the election results, when they took Runcorn and Helsby, large numbers of working class voters, when they took control of Durham County Council, Labour has been the largest party on Durham County Council since time immemorial. It's a proper, you know, true former coal mining territory. And when reform is hoovering up votes like that and leading every opinion poll, and main bookmakers now, all the main bookmakers have installed Farage as the favourite to become the next Prime Minister, you have to say that something is clearly happening out there, that there is another political realignment going on. And I think, and I'm a Labour person, of course, I'm on the left, and I think that unless Labour gets back in touch with those working class communities very quickly, particularly on the issue of immigration, I mean, it hasn't really made any progress on that for the last year, and securing growth, unless it does those two things very quickly, I think it can kiss goodbye to any chance of winning the next election.
What's astonishing is when you see what is happening across Europe, the recipe is quite clear to me that the Labour Party should well be following. You look at the new Chancellor of Germany, what's the first thing that he's decided to do? Close its borders. You're now not allowed into Germany if you are undocumented, let alone previously there were no border checks whatsoever and refugees were welcome. Germany's really clamping down. You look at Poland. What's it decided to do? Close its borders. We refuse to take any more asylum seekers. You look at Sweden, really, I think at the brunt of mass immigration, the societal changes that have happened there have been absolutely gobsmacking. And what have they decided to do? They're banning burqas and they're scrapping benefits from people who have migrated to the country. It's very simple. Other countries in Europe have woken up to the reality that the public are against mass migration, particularly from men from different cultures who do not uphold Western values, and yet this Labour Party seems so terrified of needing the Muslim voting bloc when the writing's on the wall. Even if you look at these local elections, guess what, Starmer? The Muslims aren't voting for you anymore. They've got their own candidates. Why doesn't the Prime Minister wake up, abandon plans for things like putting into statute Islamophobia, and start addressing the big cultural issues that are at the crux of this political revolution?
Well, look, I'm that old-fashioned thing on the left. I'm someone on the left who believes in control of the labour supply. And once upon a time, that was a mainstream position on the left. The position of open borders was largely a position that was articulated by Trotskyists and anarchists and hyper-liberals. Most Labour MPs and trade union leaders understood that you needed to be able to control the labour supply so as to allow the government to make sure it can plan around jobs and housing and welfare and so on, and to make sure that there wasn't undue downward pressure on wages. But now, if you articulate that position on the left these days, as I know from experience, you're almost looked upon at best as some sort of museum piece, and at worst as some sort of bigot or nativist. And I have no doubt whatsoever. I mean, I've been active in the Labour movement for pretty much the last 30 years, and it seems abundantly clear to me that one of the main reasons for the rupture between the Labour Party and the working class is the issue of immigration. And the sad thing is, Alex, that immigration in the 1990s had really ceased to be a topic in our national discourse because, you know, numbers were relatively low. They were tens of thousands most years, net migration. People felt generally that the system was being regulated properly. It wasn't an issue. And then all of a sudden, with the turn of the century, you had the new global market, the impact of deindustrialization, rapid demographic change, globalization was really starting to take hold. We then saw EU enlargement in 2004, and the numbers significantly increased. And as we know, most migrants will go to already hard-pressed working class communities. That put pressure on wages and infrastructure, public services, and so on. And what was genuine concern and disorientation on the part of working class people was presented by large parts of the Labour movement as bigotry and nativism and racism. And it's no surprise to me that while that narrative has taken hold, so many millions of working class people have moved away from the Labour Party. And unless the Labour Party understands that message, I think some in the party do, but not many, then, as I say, it may lose the support of these working class communities forever, frankly.
But this is the problem with the Labour Party. It seems to me all they blimmin' do is play a numbers game. Is we need this voting block, so we better not upset the apple cart. And like you said, some of them are so indoctrinated with their own anti-bigotry hype that the scales just won't fall away from their eyes. But this isn't just about people going, well, you know, I'm worried about my job, I'm worried about wage compression. This is people looking at the fact that their nana is afraid to put on the heating in winter, and the government said we've got to make these tough choices because we've got a massive multi-billion pound black hole, and then spiralling migrant housing costs have just wiped out all those savings anyway. And not only is Nana Jeffries worried about sticking her heating on or putting the kettle on or whether she can afford to put another coin in the meter, but she's now got a load of hooded Sudanese, Eritrean, Somalian, Iraqi, Afghan men living next door who terrify the living daylights out of her. She don't want to leave her house. And people are looking at this country, as are these World War II veterans who look to Nigel Farage saying, please, can you save Britain from losing its values, and saying, whose country is this anyway? And why is it that the Labour Party can't seem to bring themselves? They might say this is historic, you know, deal with India on trade, but never mind, let's look away from all the workers' visas. Oh, look at what we've done. This deal with America is putting the nation's interests first. At the heart of it, nobody believes it because they can't deal with this one issue. And Lucy Powell's comments on any questions the other week when she called bringing up, just even mentioning the issues of those rape gangs dog whistling, sadly typifies what we suspect most of the Labour Party's values really are, which is anti-British, anti-Christian, anti-white, anti-us.
Well, certainly some of the Labour Party, but not all of it. Not me, for example, and not, I think, a growing group of Labour MPs who are starting to get the message and are articulating the things that I've said during this discussion. For example, there's now a caucus of what's called Blue Labour MPs. Blue Labour is a tendency within the Labour Party that's been around for about 15 years, which actually predicted the rupture between the Labour Party and the working class because of the party's position on things like globalisation and mass immigration. And understands that actually there is very much a small c conservative thread that runs through many working class communities. You can be Labour, you can be proud Labour, but still be a small c conservative. You know, the post-industrial Britain is full of voters like that. And the problem is that the Labour Party has largely abandoned those voters. The Labour Party, when it succeeds, I wrote a piece about this morning, the Labour Party, when it succeeds, needs to hold together 3 places as part of its coalition. That's Hartlepool, Hampstead and Hackney. And Hartlepool is the post-industrial northern town. Hampstead is the liberal intelligentsia, and Hackney is, if you like, the place of the young, urban, cosmopolitan, progressive. All of those people have got a part to play in supporting and sustaining the Labour Party. But the problem is, one element of it, the Hartlepool element, has been completely neglected by the Labour Party again and again and again. And because of that, it's become essentially a party for the professional and managerial classes, a party for kind of middle-class liberals living in our fashionable cities and university towns. But I think there is a sense now amongst some MPs that unless we start articulating blue Labour ideas, the importance of family, community and nation, then frankly we're done and dusted as far as the next election.
That's the problem, isn't it? Family, community and nation is the current mantra of Reform UK. Let's stay where you are, Paul. I want to bring in a caller, Kevin in North Yorkshire, and get his opinion on what we're talking about. Hi there, Kevin.
Hello there. Yeah, I've been thinking about this for some time, actually. The rise of reform, which is a great thing, but the issue being is that the right has realigned itself. It's adjusted. It's done what will be natural, and until Labour does exactly the same thing, and I think that's the only thing that's going to change things and put things back on an even keel again. You need a strong left. You need a strong right. What comes out in the middle is common sense. That's how it always has been. What you've got now is you've got the centre ground where the Camerons and the Blairs all flock to. People don't want that. They don't want that broad church, that wide tent that everybody talks about. We need clear left. We need clear right. We've got clear right now in Reform. What we need is clear left. And until they realise that and get back on track, and it will take a similar sort of revolution to happen on the left. It'll take those people that. But what do you?
I want to ask you, Kevin. What do you mean by clear left? Because are you sort of suggesting that you echo the sentiments of Louise Haigh, who, of course, was the Transport Minister expelled over PhoneGate, who said that actually the Labour Party aren't being left-wing enough. What it needs to do is be bolder about raising taxes and pumping more money into public services.
No, I mean, I'm thinking more along where your gentleman's just talking about, where the small C Conservative runs through. Where what you're talking about is clear, the clear left mentality with regards to the working class people. But like he says, they've left those behind, and those were the clear majority within that group.
So
and they're not.
I'm going to throw this back to Paul Embry, because you're both talking about essentially being sort of more socially traditional, right? So the sort of values that Britain was built on, and we're going back to what these World War II veterans were saying, who are looking to Nigel Farage as the only person who can save and protect those values. So Keir Starmer seems to have managed to have some sort of Damascene conversion over various things. He's had a radical revolution in his views on Trump. 1 minute he's like, I wouldn't have him over for dinner, he's a danger to the world. Next he's pouring him in the Oval Office, whipping out the invitation for the state visit. He also seems to have had some sort of Copernican revolution when it comes to Brexit, and seems to be banking some of those Brexit dividends with trade deals. Do you think Starmer has it within him, Paul, to wake up one morning and suddenly go, do you know what? I'm going to have to do something radical when it comes to addressing the societal concerns, the cultural concerns of this nation, and potentially fire someone like Lucy Powell, who essentially saw the whole house of cards tumbling when she decided to call concerns about rape gangs dog whistling?
I mean, to answer your question directly, I'm sceptical that he does have it within him. I'm sceptical that large parts of the party have it within them. I mean, I've long felt, Alex, that there's a huge space in British politics for a party that articulates left-leaning ideas on the economy. So it wants to see a fairer economy. It wants to increase real wages, increase the national minimum wage, reduce the gap between rich and poor, make sure there's good investment in our public services, re-industrialise some of our neglected communities, our coastal towns, our post-industrial towns, places outside the M25. And, rebalancing the economy, putting more resources into the real economy, stopping the obsession with financial services. But at the same time, I think those people lean right on issues such as culture. They are in many respects patriotic people. They do believe in family and the nation state. They are quite patriotic. They don't like the idea of, lawlessness on our streets. They're not obsessed with LGBT rights. Family, place, community, these things matter to them. And none of the main parties, frankly, frankly, for years. Although they've had a stab at it and pretended about it from time to time, none of them have really properly articulated those ideas or given the impression that they really believe in them. And I think that the abandonment of people who believe in that particular position was largely what drove the Brexit vote nearly 10 years ago. It was a vote to smash the status quo and the liberal, if you like, technocratic globalist orthodoxy. And here we are 9 years later, and large parts of our political establishment still haven't got it.
Yeah, I tell you who is getting it, though, Nigel Farage. The polling is showing that, I mean, listening to what you just said, Paul, it almost sounds like an academic description of what Reform UK's political ideology could be framed as. Paul Embry, thank you ever so much. Fantastic man, trade unionist and writer. Right, so we're going to take a short break now. After the break, I'd love to hear from you. It is your turn to throw your opinions about the plays. Join the chorus and sing a song. 03444991000 is the number to dial. I'd love to hear you opine on whatever it is that tickles your fancy. It's charged at your normal network rate. You can also use that number to WhatsApp me or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I love playing those out. So it's only 1 minute, isn't it? Go on, why don't you press that little microphone on the phone, say what you think. 87222 is the number if you'd like me to send me a text message. You have to write talk before you text. We're also on X at talkTV and hopefully be hearing from some of you after this.
It's going to be a big, beautiful deal, I'm sure. Trump will tell us. And it's from the UK perspective, I cannot see this as anything but good news. It's a great Brexit dividend, and isn't it ironic that Brexit dividend should go to Keir Starmer, and full credit to him for getting this over the line. But of course, he was Remainer-in-Chief. He was the guy who tried to overturn Brexit, tried to do everything he could to stop Brexit happening, and now maybe this Brexit benefit.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
My wonderful producer, Ted, who is always on the ball. I was just banging on about all the things that are going on across. So my other producer, Alicia's looking at me with an accusing face through the glass because I'm singling out Ted and showering him with praise. Yeah, Alicia, go make that cup of tea. That's right. I'm only joking. They're all laughing behind the glass now, but it is real. I do want a cup of tea. Anyway, my wonderful producer, Ted, who is equally as good as Alicia, who is also splendid. As I was talking about what was going on around Europe, came in with a printed out news story for me, because this is exactly what I was talking about. Germany has now finally got their new Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, after a coalition agreement between the Conservatives and the Social Democrats. Now, Merz is basically from, I think it's CDU, CDU, isn't he? Some Angela Merkel's old party. So we're not really talking about the AfD anywhere near power. There's also talk about banning them from standing. Apparently, intelligence services in Germany are saying they're far right. And so there's legal moves to try and block the AfD from getting anywhere near a ballot box anytime soon. But he seems to have listened to the mood music. And one of the first things that he's done is ordered border police to turn away undocumented immigrants, including asylum seekers. That's according to their Interior Minister, Alexander Dobrindt. He announced a decision to rescind the 2015 instruction, which is Angela Merkel's refugees welcome, that allowed entry for third country nationals. Good. I mean, it's your blimmin' country. Control the border. You don't want any old Tom, Dick and Harry from some random nation just coming in saying, we live here now. And look what went on in Germany. Cars constantly being driven into members of the public. Stabbings in places like Essen. It's become the headquarters of dinghies. When you see all these boats setting off from the coast of France, they're all stored in warehouses over in Germany. It is a hotbed of terrorist activity, people trafficking, all down to open border policy. And like I was saying, look what they've decided to do in Sweden. Their asylum seeker applications have dropped vastly. Why? Because they said, right, no more Islamism, no more wearing of burqas and no more benefits. And do you know what? When you suddenly say this isn't the El Dorado of whatever you want it to be, the people no longer want to traipse into your country and demand settlement there. It does work. It's called a deterrent. Perhaps our country can learn from that. Poland as well. We're full. No more asylum applications. And that is from Donald Tusk, who used to be, of course, the head of the European Council, right at the heart of the EU. They've seemed to have picked up the memo, the other side of the channel, that the general public are disgusted with what European leaders have done to our continent and our cultures and our communities. And yet our ridiculous, lily-livered, lefty, liberal, lazy government have done absolutely nothing. Instead, they're going to, for the next 4 years, preside over extreme cultural vandalism. Sir Keir Starmer, get the message. Look at the polling. Do something. This isn't about you staying in number 10. This isn't about the voting blocks. This is about saving Britain while you still have the chance. Because if you allow immigration to continue at the rate it has been for the next 4 years, if you don't clamp down on divided communities, if you don't nip in the bud the extremism that is dwelling underground in some of our religious institutions around the country, if you do not do something now to end the cultural vandalism of this nation, it will be too late. This isn't about saving your skin. This isn't about saving your party's skin. This isn't about maintaining the two-party system. This is about saving a nation that has thrived for 2,000 years. That is your responsibility. You're in number 10. I don't care about the rest of your ideologies. I don't care what the rest of your manifesto looks like. What I care about is in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time being able to wake up, open the curtains, walk outside my front door, and it's still to be Great Britain. And a lot of people think that way. Wake up, do something about it, or forever it will be on your shoulders and your legacy. Sorry about that. I had to get that off my chest. Right, let's speak to Robert, who's in Hertfordshire. Hello there, Robert.
Oh, hi, Alex. Listening to you is just like listening to myself.
Blimey, the inside of your head's going to be a pretty disturbing place at times.
Bring it on. Listen, first thing we should do, we can do this in a week. We need to start flying the flag now. Our flag is a Union Jack. That's our flag. We need to make it law to fly it in every single government building, in City Hall. Tell Sadiq Khan, if you don't fly it, you get the sack. And you'll get the sack. That's your duty. Every town hall, every library, every university, every school, every council building, we fly the flag. All along the Kent beaches, we put a great big flagpole up just to remind these migrants when they come in where they are.
Yeah, but also remind us where we are, because sometimes you go to certain parts of the United Kingdom and you'd be forgiven for thinking you'd been in some sort of magical portal to a far-flung nation. What is wrong with celebrating this country? There was something beautiful. I've just come back from wonderful, wonderful Wiltshire. Many parts of Wiltshire, proud military towns and villages. And because it was VE Day, the Union flag was fluttering from masts all outside people's houses. pubs festooned with bunting. They were so proud, and it just gave me such wonderful pride and joy and a sense of belonging. It was just so positive and optimistic. And when we see our nation's flag proudly displayed on our public buildings, that is what it does. It's a bit like walking past someone in the countryside on a hike and saying hello and having a smile, and they say hello back, and it just lifts your spirits. It sort of puts a spring in your step. When you see your nation's flag proudly displayed, it makes you feel happy. It's that simple, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but it's just a reminder for the people who are coming into the country to have a little bit more respect. Like I said to you, I would put them on the shipping lanes. I would float all the flags, so when you're coming over in your boats, just to let you know where you are. The other thing I would do is ban any other flag. No more Palestinian flags. Fly them in your embassy. That's where you can fly them if you want. But you don't have no more. I'll make it an offence for even people to brandish a flag in this country that's not a Union Jack. We are too tolerant, and that is our trouble. Tolerance has been taken the mickey of.
Well, yeah, we've got to a stage where we're tolerating intolerance. That is the biggest peril facing this country. Robert, thank you ever so much. That's Robert in Hertfordshire. We're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be catching up with Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, about everything going on in the world of defence, in the world of geopolitics. It's busy season right now. We need an expert to unpick it. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back and welcome to the show. Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Simon, fantastic to have you on the programme. I want to ask you, first of all, about a story that's in The Sun today that is proving to be very popular, which is this suggestion that pupils in schools should be given military training to instil discipline, restore national pride and get them fitter. What are your thoughts on that?
Alex, good morning to you. I mean, we've had a cadet force movement, which is a very effective cadet force movement in this country for a long time. And when I see them on parade, I'm hugely prideful of them. It's wonderful to see them there. If that can be extended to other parts of the school system, I think that's excellent as well. I think there's something important about the idea of being together, the teamwork, the discipline, and a sense of national identity and national pride that can come with it. And I think it can be done very well. It can be done very sensitively and very and very effectively too. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, no, me too. I must admit, I think we've got so many kids tooling around on bikes with hoodies on, carrying machetes. They'd be far better doing press-ups and learning why this country is so great. They have such things, I think, in Belgium, Switzerland, Scandinavia, and kids are just fat and feckless these days. Get them doing some press-ups, I say. So, I'm a bit of a hyper mood today, Simon.
Absolutely, go for it.
Right, now, well, I'll tell you else what I'm in a hyper mood about, which is a story that doesn't tend to break much cover in the UK, and I think it is of huge significance, although it tends to be kind of complicated for people to wrap their heads about. And this is the fact that May the 19th, we've got a big UK-EU summit. Yeah, the papers are talking about trade deals in the wake of what's happened in America. The thing that concerns me the most, Simon, is the fact that we're about to sign up to PESCO, the defence union, and all of the stuff that comes with that. And people might go, well, that's great. Yeah, the EU all getting together and sharing in facilities and arms and all the rest of it. And part of it, I think we have some brilliant projects with our allied states over in Europe, building aeroplanes and this, that and the other. But signing up to the EU Defence Pact, in my mind, is deeply concerning. I want to know what your views are on that.
I don't share the same concerns. I completely agree with you about cooperation in terms of defence cooperation and everything goes there. Indeed, we've done that for many, many years across some of our most significant weapon systems. I mean, to give you one very example, the Storm Shadow system is actually a joint British and French system, and it's been very effective in Ukraine. On the wider issue of the kind of EU force, there's always been this thought within, even when NATO was, if you like, fully operational and without the challenge it currently got, that it should be what they call a European defence identity from that. And we indeed have actually contributed to various EU forces, European forces, in the past. So I don't see this as a major change. Of course, there is concerns in terms of it being another way, if you like, of hiding our national identity, and those issues do exist. But in the basic principle of whether we should be cooperating together with European forces under some sort of structure like that, I don't have a problem. In many occasions, in fact, the leader of those European forces, EU forces, were actually British officers. And so I think there are ways to, if you like, on this occasion, both have our cake and eat it as well, without compromising some of the changes that have occurred as a result of Brexit.
Is there not a worry, though, that if we sort of go too far down the route of EU defence union, that we end up essentially handing over some of our sovereignty when it comes to foreign affairs? And when you look at how slow the EU is to make decisions, and you look at after Russia invaded Ukraine, they're hand-wringing even over sanctions, let alone whether certain weapons where the provenance was Germany would be allowed to be sold on by Poland or the Czech Republic for use in Ukraine. And then, of course, the energy deals that countries like Germany happen to have with the Kremlin. Is there not a concern here that this is going to undermine NATO, that we're going to actually find it very difficult to assert ourselves on the global stage without a nod from Brussels?
I mean, that could be. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable, idea you put forward, because I think at its worst, that's exactly what could happen. On the other hand, we are now in a situation where NATO as NATO doesn't operate as clearly as it used to in the past. We now have President Trump making clear, he's not saying that America's going to walk away from NATO, but they are expecting the Europeans to stand up on their own 2 feet. Britain by itself has not and cannot be entirely sort of, if you like, autarkic, in other words, entirely capable of its own self-defense. It does need cooperation with other people. It does it already with groups of people, for example, in the Baltic, through the Joint Expeditionary Force. It's done it in the past as part of European Union forces, as I said, often commanded by British officers. Whether it can respond as well and as quickly as NATO might be able to do if it was fully operational, I think is there to be tested. But I think that's the challenge. We need to work that one out and make sure that its decision-making processes are appropriate to the kind of challenges we should be meeting. It's not there yet, and we need to think very carefully about how we do it. But the basic principle of us actually operating together with the other forces from Europe under some kind of EU umbrella, if necessary, I don't have a particular problem with, provided there are some sort of safeguards in terms of national sovereignty, and as you rightly point out, that we don't lose the ability to move quickly and independently ourselves if we need so to do.
Oh, you assuage my fears somewhat, Simon, but I must say, as soon as the EU gets an inch, they want to take... Well, they wouldn't take an inch, would they? Because that's our particularly imperial system of measurements. Give them a centimetre and they'll take a kilometre. And I do worry a little bit about that. Right, let's talk now about... I mean, Putin, it's a big Victory Day parade in Russia right now. It's their opportunity to say, we won the war against the Nazis and all the rest of it. They get all their weapons out and there's high security and there's all the sort of pomp and ceremony and sort of, you know, showing the world that our missiles are bigger than yours. And guess who's guest of honour? That's right, President Xi Jinping. I mean, what's going to derail Putin? Because in theory, there's supposed to be a ceasefire. He said it himself for the next 3 days, except it doesn't seem to be happening.
No, there is no ceasefire. I mean, I listened to a Ukrainian military spokesman this morning and say there's been endless breaks of the ceasefire. And again, as the Ukrainians quite rightly pointed out, you know, there's a 30-day ceasefire available on the table right now. All that Putin has to do is stop the aggression. But in terms of who turned up there, President Z turned up there. The other person who turned up there was the Slovak president. And there's also been other representatives from countries we thought were allied with us in NATO. I think they're the people to look out for because they basically represent a kind of a weakness in the wall there. Another report that came through this morning was of Hungarian military intelligence apparently spying on the Ukrainian military. Particularly in terms of air defence. Now, Hungary has got its semi-detached relationship not only to NATO, but also to the European Union. But it's a point of weakness, and I think just tells us that it's not so straightforward. These are not two sort of blocks fighting each other. There are chinks in the wall there. And I think we need to be very wary of where those chinks are. Hungary shares a border with Ukraine. Its air defence systems are part of NATO's air defence systems, and it appears to be spying on Ukraine's air defence systems. And the suspicion is that information being passed back to Moscow.
Ooh, yeah, and actually, it sort of comes back to what I was saying about worrying about EU defence pacts and the sort of people who have different geopolitical interests to ours. Now, talking about, very often when you want to sort of figure out who's on whose side, you follow the money. And when you're talking about in the theatre of war, it's who's buying whose weapons. And we're talking about President Xi over there today in Moscow, guest of honour during their big sort of Victory Day celebrations. And yet, you cast your eyes over to the eastern hemisphere of the globe and you have got a burgeoning big old battle going on between two historical enemies, Pakistan and India. And, I must stress to anyone listening to this, it's hard to find two countries who hate each other more. But these are two nuclear-armed countries. And what's interesting, of course, is Pakistan seemingly getting all of its fighter aircraft from China. For the first time, they've been tested in the theatre of war, very successful at shooting down the French Rafale jets that India was using. But Russia, by and large, gets a lot of its hardware. India gets a lot of its hardware from Russia. Simon, what is going on with India and Pakistan? How worried should we be?
I think we should be worried. I think that the reason for that is that particularly the use of air power, I was looking at it this morning to try and get some sense of where this conflict is going. I mean, there's both nuclear-armed powers. They both have rough parity in terms of nuclear weapons. And up until now, the fact they've both acquired nuclear weapons has acted as a sort of deterrence against them. They've had endless clashes, and they continue to have endless clashes up in the high mountains in the mountains of Pakistan and India, where they come together. And all the previous clashes they've had have tended not to involve air power. This particular clash has involved air power. And whilst there's a kind of a mechanism whereby they can de-escalate, and I understand, for example, that the mechanism has now been opened. They have an operational hotline between the chiefs of staff of the Pakistan and Indian army. The worry is that the rhetoric and the political pressure, and both countries are basically run by nationalists, who ramp up that kind of populist pressure, that those control mechanisms may not work, in which case you then have a much more dangerous situation escalating out of control. There's up until now a degree of control, but there is always a concern. And I think particularly with the nuclear, they're both nuclear armed and they're tactically nuclear armed, so they could conceivably think, well, actually, we can steal one over and not to destroy each other's countries, that actually this could escalate into a much more horrific and terrible war. It's bad enough as it is, but it could easily turn into something much, much worse.
Yeah, Simon, I totally agree with everything you say. I think we should be very terrified about what is emerging over there. Colonel Simon Diggins, thank you ever so much. Now, look, between you and me, I actually, when I was an MEP, I was invited by Prime Minister Modi to go over to Jammu in Kashmir. It was at the time that the Indian-controlled part of Kashmir was completely locked off to any foreign visitors. They had cut all internet connection to the region, came under pressure from the international community to open themselves up, see what was going on in there, let foreigners come and have a peek at what India might be doing in Jammu. And we were all taken to an intelligence briefing. And what we were essentially told is this: if you don't understand the makeup of Kashmir, you've got the Chinese-controlled bit, the Pakistan-controlled bit, the Indian-controlled bit, but in theory it's all supposed to be autonomous. And what I was told in that intelligence briefing was they were being absolutely flooded from the Pakistani side, people coming into Kashmir, massively changing the demographics, and within those people coming in, plenty of Pakistani-backed terror cells, and that is why they decided to take extreme action. That was the line that we were told when we went over to visit there. And I can remember being in armoured vehicles, convoys of armoured vehicles, riddled with bullet holes. We went up to the military base. We saw lots of presentations on what was going on. Beautiful country, Kashmir. But the one thing that you understand when you delve into this, and you don't have to dig very far, is India despises Pakistan. Pakistan despises India. It comes down to two warring religions, and how one or the other steps back from the brink, I don't know. But these are two big, when it comes to nuclear weapons, military superpowers. And like I said earlier, the proxy war gets really interesting. Pakistan getting most of their weaponry from China, India getting theirs from Russia. There'll be interesting conversations going on between Putin and Xi today. It's a victory day in Moscow, of that I'm sure. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be discussing the ongoing battle over trans ideology. You'd think the Supreme Court would have put it to bed. Apparently not, because MPs are now seeking assurance that UK gender guidance will not ignore trans people. So what was it all about? What does it even mean? We're going to be catching up with Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, after this.
This is not quite a staggering result for reform. I think bigger than even they were expecting, and it's going to have a few reverberations, isn't it? We've already seen Keir Starmer this week coming out with all manner of sort of what you might have called right-wing policies about migrants. You know, saying that you're all going to have to speak English now when you come here. Which, if the Tories had said that a couple of years ago, they'd have been denounced as Nazis and fascists.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, they would.
All
would. We've now
all governments have said that, and they all.
Yeah, but the Labour government have never said it. The Labour government have never said it.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, of course, there was that historic Supreme Court ruling where after, I don't know, a century of campaigning for things like the vote and equal pay, women were told you have to go all the way to the highest court in the land just to exist. Well, hey, turns out we do. Woo! And that should have put everything to bed. And you saw a lot in the wake of that Supreme Court ruling that, guess what, women are women and men are men. A lot of public bodies and a lot of sporting organisations all of a sudden changing their rules and saying, right, that's it. We're not going to have male competitors in female sports, and we're not going to have men in changing rooms. And yet, the cross-party committee overseeing these things has now written to the EHRC, not to be confused with the ECHR. That is the Equality and Human Rights Commission of the United Kingdom, the UK Equalities Watchdog, let's call it, basically saying, right, you now need to write guidance which does include trans people. And so we're kind of back to square one, it feels. Let's speak to Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters and author of Transgender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights, a lead campaigner in all of this. First of all, welcome to the show, Helen. Second of all, thank you so much for your hard work for years and years and years and years, being brave, putting your head above the parapet, fighting for us women. There are 1,000 thank yous. That doesn't even go far enough. But, I mean, the celebrations have been quite sort of short-lived. We've seen public bodies actually immediately changing their guidelines in response to the Supreme Court ruling. But it seems to me like Parliament is saying, but hang on a minute. If you've got these trans people who may have had surgery and, been living as a woman for so long and using female toilets, and all of a sudden they're being told you've got to use men's toilets, what about them? It kind of feels like this is an interminable battle.
It really is, Alex. And I'll say thank you on behalf of all the women, because obviously I did not do this on my own. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see but what about the men? Like every interview that I did and other people did after the ruling, the first thing people asked us, the journalists who haven't been covering this at the outlets that haven't been covering it like you have, was straight away, but what about trans women? And you're like, can I celebrate for the half of humanity that's female for just a minute before we wonder about how the poor men feel about all of this? So then it really does appear the gender Borg is regrouping and refocusing on the poor men who have been told that they can use women's spaces, which they should never have been told in the first place. And even if a man is told he can, there's nothing stopping him from thinking about how women won't want it and not going in. But that's where we're back to. I wouldn't say it's Parliament as such. This is a particular committee that's written to the EHRC. And I don't know who signed it, but I mean, they reveal a worrying degree of legal illiteracy. There's no doubt about that. They say that the EHRC is being overly literal in its interpretation of the Supreme Court. It's a regulator. The Supreme Court says what the law means. The law is written in words. You have to be literal about it. I mean, you feel that this should rule someone out of being in Parliament, don't you? This level of ignorance and, frankly, stupidity. But listen, the EHRC will plough ahead and it will produce guidance. But in the meantime, what the Supreme Court says is the law. It became the law the second they said it. There's no need to wait for what the EHRC says, and anyone who says there's a need to wait for that is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I always think when when people go, yeah, but what about the men? What about the person who was called James and now he's called Jane and for the last 20 years he's been using ladies' toilets? Well, use the disabled loo, why don't you? I mean, and then there's also this sort of concept, well, it'd be dangerous for them to go in men's toilets. So why don't you put the pressure on men to be more tolerant, right? Why is it like, well, you don't have to do this, women have to carry the burden all the time? My concern is this, Helen, right? Because I was doing BBC Politics Live the day after the Supreme Court ruling, and they had a barrister on who for a long time he was a trans man, woman, one of them himself, and been taking on a lot of cases, and the direction of travel seemed very clear. What he wanted to say, right, well, now that's all cleared up and women are women and men are men, everything has to be unisex. This is my concern now, that is going to be the next push.
They're certainly trying that on, but there are two strong legal reasons that they won't be able to. One is that employers have a duty to provide single-sex toilets and changing rooms. Not mixed sex, single sex. They really have to do that. It's not optional. So now the Supreme Court has said that when you say female or male, it has to mean female or male. Employers will have to do that. And that's a lot of the toilets in the country. And the second one is that if you go unisex, this is probably indirect sex discrimination against women because it's worse for women. So, I mean, we may have to keep fighting by law, but I hope not. I hope that the EHRC, but also the Health and Safety Executive and local authorities which regulate workplaces will get their arses in gear and actually start doing what they should have done all along, which is to say, the law says you have to provide these. Stop messing around. We all know who's a man and who's a woman. In a workplace, if you've got a man who's going into the ladies, you can't do this thing of saying, well, how can you tell? You know he's a man. You can complain about him to HR. HR can raise a disciplinary. It's not the case that we can't do something about this. We absolutely can. So, yeah, I mean, I'm depressed at how much people are trying to obfuscate the ruling, lie about it, delay acting and so on. But they are now strictly, very much clearly acting unlawfully. And we are just going to have to keep pointing that out and bringing it home to them.
My worry is this, Helen, that the EHRC, hopefully, will listen to the Supreme Court. And the EHRC, by and large, hasn't been too terrible on this stuff. It has sort of maintained some degree of common sense in this argument. But a lot of the sort of battle for trans rights has actually come from the ECHR. It's very complicated, having the EHRC and the ECHR, which, of course, is still a higher court than our own Supreme Court. Is there a risk if people take this over to Strasbourg that we're just going to go back to square one?
Well, they can't take the For Women Scotland case to Strasbourg because only the Scottish Government could do that, and it says it won't. So that's dead. So they would have to start again with a new case and go all the way up through the various courts. Well, we know what all the courts in the UK would say. They would take the Supreme Court ruling. But also the Supreme Court ruling, which is 88 pages long and is very, very clear, and I would recommend people read it, although I'd never read a judgment before doing this work myself. It's actually very readable. It lays out why it came to the decision it did, and one of the reasons is because it's the only way to protect women's human rights.
Oh, Helen,
so
you've reassured me.
This. Yeah, don't worry. This is a big victory, but we need to win the win now.
We do need to win the win, and we need to make sure it is applied universally. Helen Joyce, thank you ever so much. The fantastic Helen Joyce, who's really a Boudica in our midst. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because guess who's joining me the other side of it? Oh, yeah, he's always angry, he's always prickly, he's always fun. It's Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan after this.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Do you know, in our profession of broadcasting, there's a little technical term that we like to call the segue, which is how you manage to glide seamlessly from one topic to the next. And it's a fine art to try and master, going from talking about trans rights and men in women's toilets to then introducing Kevin O'Sullivan. So how am I going to segue that? Well, I thought to myself, here's a man who loves donning a wig. Let's have a look, shall we?
Shortly after hearing the court's legal judgment, a devastated Prince Harry sat down for what was an emotional and candid interview. I started by asking him how he was feeling.
I'm shocked by the decision. Everyone said I was going to win. And I always win. I'm always right. I'm never going to bring my wife back to Britain now, and it's your fault. And she's gutted because she wanted to flog her jam on QVC.
Do you want the court battle to continue?
I don't want any more court battles. I can't afford them. I've run out of money. My wife keeps spending it all on edible flowers. If I don't write another book soon, I'll end up like Fergie.
So what's your feelings kind of moving forward? Is there any way that this could be resolved?
I'd love to reconcile with my family, but they all hate me. I don't know why. All I did was call them a bunch of racists. Daddy won't speak to me anymore, and he won't even try Meghan's jam. I mean, it's not my fault. None of this is my fault. It's everyone else's fault. Why do they blame me?
Oh, there he is, Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. He loves the game of dress-up. He's like a 21st century Mr. Ben. Kev, welcome to the show. I'll tell you what, if that wig had been blonde, I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between you and Michael Fabricant. Take the specs off and there you go.
I'll tell you something, Alex. This is very disconcerting, but quite a number of women have said to me, "I really fancied you like that." So I know that sounds unlikely, and my response was, "What? So you don't fancy me normally then?" And oh no. So I may adopt that look on a permanent basis.
Where did you meet these women? Down at the Learn Braille Centre or something?
No, they were all very eligible, to be honest.
Were they? Well, get you. Now talking.
The wig soon.
Talking about that, I don't quite know what to call it other than that. Meghan Markle, she gave out her homemade bath salt recipe, and some woman's followed it, watched the Netflix show. We'd love Meghan, and has spooned together a load of rubbish and whacked it in her bath. And has apparently developed persistent burning, discomfort, blister-like sores and ulcers. Oh dear, she now wants to sue Meghan for £7 million.
Exactly. Her name is Robin Patrick, an American lady. Now, a lot of people are saying this may well be an opportunistic legal bid. She's only threatening to do so. But in fairness to Robin Patrick and anyone else who's tried Meghan's bath salt recipe, straight after that went onto Netflix, and we all had to endure watching that dreadful towering, tedious nonsense from Meghan, that programme. Experts came out and said, you've got to be careful with this, because she basically said, oh, you take some Himalayan salt and you take some Epsom salt, you just chuck it all in, put some oil in, mix it round, and then you wrap it up and put some ribbons around it, you put it by the bath, and everybody feels so pleased to be your guest, and all this. Well, experts say, well, hang on a second, these salts are actually corrosive. If you get the right amount, they're refreshing and they clean you and all that. But if you get the wrong amount, they will actually burn you. So it is possible that this lawsuit is valid. What is it about me that I really hope it is?
I really hope it is. I love that. It would delight me so much. I mean, it's such a... I remember when we watched it together, and it's just the most... I haven't watched an episode since. Have you watched any others?
I watched this. I think I watched the second one in the line of duty, but even in the line of duty, I could go no further. I mean, I don't say this lightly, but With Love, Meghan just might be even more boring than her podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder, but it's a close run thing.
Oh, she's so tedious, isn't she? It's absolutely ridiculous. She's so tedious. I mean, I kind of wanted to watch it for the thrill of hating it. I didn't even get that out of it. It was just a snooze fest. Yeah. Maybe that should be watch this for a good night's sleep.
She swallowed a bucket full of boring pills, and she has no idea how to be entertaining. So she should butt out of our lives, I think.
She really should. Now let's talk about someone else who's got no idea how to be entertaining, and that is the Prime Minister. Other than just seemingly walking into one faux pas after the other, he's like, we're celebrating a historic trade deal with America. I get it. The man wasn't even there. It was a football match. Donald Trump basically put a gun to his head saying we're going to whack a load of tariffs against you, sunshine, and at the 11th hour has rode back a little bit, although we're still worse off than we were before. And Sir Keir Starmer there, he's sort of like, it's a bit like when you watched Harry and Meghan, and Harry's just, you know, looking through the window juggling or something like that. That's kind of like the relationship between the Oval Office and Sir Keir Starmer, who just seems to be bootlicking, pandering, weak, pathetic, and Donald Trump's playing him like a fiddle.
Absolutely. Now, this puts us all in a quandary, really, because Donald Trump played Keir Starmer like a fiddle, exactly like he wants to play every other country that he slapped these enormous tariffs on. His plan always was, right, I'm going to put a 50% tariff on everything going to your country. The country complains and says, come on, come on, come on. So, all right, let's talk. And then he go, all right, we'll make it 15%. We'll make it 10%. Other country, okay, we'll take that. Net result, America wins. America ends up with a 10% increase, which is exactly what has happened here with Keir Starmer. I mean, Keir Starmer could not negotiate his way out of a paper bag. He is dreadful. And Trump just beat him. However, that said, we've got to be fair here. Signing that deal was probably about as good as we could have got. So we used to pay, on average, 25% on nearly everything, according to his new deal from Liberation Day. And he's cut it back to 10%. One or two areas, steel, aluminium, car parts, right back to zero. So what he's done is the classic maneuver. Right, I'm going to charge you £1 million. Oh, don't charge us that. All right, then I'll charge you $500,000. Okay, we'll take that deal. So Starmer has been suckered. That said, I don't think he could have done any better. This deal has saved jobs, and inadvertently and rather brilliantly, Keir Starmer doesn't realise, because he's so seriously thick, that he has become the hero of Brexit. Because the other bad deal he's done this week was with India. $5 billion trade deal. Sounds good until you look at the details. You know, it's going to cost us 200 billion pounds, I think, in tax losses, because all these Indians who are going to come and work here won't have to pay national insurance. It's not a great deal, but it's a Brexit deal. We have done these deals with India and America purely mainly because we are no longer in the EU. So actually, I'm sure Starmer's so dense he doesn't realise it. He has just enshrined Brexit. So those of us who naturally oppose Mr. Starmer, sorry, Sir Keir, you know, we've got a lot to play with here. Although I do not criticise him too much for the American deal, because it's better than most. And it has saved a lot of jobs.
Yeah, I get the impression he wasn't even there. He wasn't even there, Kev. He was at the football. He didn't even know what was going on. He was phoned up while he was sitting in the stands, wasn't he, to told something had happened. Then he had to be rushed over to Jaguar Land Rover. He had no blooming clue what was being discussed. Of that, I'm certain.
But I can understand why he signed that deal. You know me. It really sticks in my throat to be reasonable, but and I'm saying this through gritted teeth. But I think in Starmer's position, or shall we say his acolyte's position, because you're right, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He doesn't understand trade. He doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand much at all. But the people who did sign this deal, I can grudgingly understand why they did.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is some might say the genius of Trump's tactics, which is, you know, basically throw your weight around, bully people into submission, get what you want out of them.
Exactly right. Yeah, he won. Trump beat us, yeah.
Do you reckon things might have been different if one Nigel Farage was Prime Minister? Because the polling lately for Reform UK is absolutely breathtaking. We also saw those local election results. The latest YouGov poll has put Reform on somewhere like 29%, Labour Party on 21%, Tories dwindling down in the teens, an 8-point lead. This is beyond a phenomenon now. This is, we're living through a political revolution, it seems. And Nigel Farage, while all the others, what was Sir Keir Starmer doing on VE Day? Oh, yeah, that's right. He was over watching the football. What were the others doing? Griping, moaning, paying lip service to something. Farage was there with World War II veterans, 3 100-year-olds, really showing that he is the one who stands up for the nation. And they adore him. And they've said to him, look, mate, you're the only one who can save Britain from losing its values. And I get the impression this is what is behind the roaring success of Reform UK at the moment, because people are blimmin' worried about losing their entire country. It's not just about, well, winter fuel allowance, oh, well, highest level of taxation. It's not even just about unfettered immigration. It is about, does anyone even like us? Does anyone even have the courage and the bravery to stand up for Britain anymore?
It's exactly right, exactly right. You know, we can go into the details of why Reform are storming forward, why they have brought about a political earthquake in this country, and why there's every chance that Nigel Farage will be our next Prime Minister. To talk about the migrant crisis, net zero, all that kind of thing. But I think in the end, the reason for their increasing success, this incredible momentum, is it's about values. It's about this country. And those 100-year-old veterans, obviously there were some veterans that were under 100 years old. Nigel went to the trouble of hosting a special lunch for our VE Day heroes, World War II heroes. And they all said to him, you know, what's happening to this country? We don't recognize it anymore. People have no respect. School kids have no respect for their elders. There's a piece in The Spectator magazine this week called Scuzz Britain, which sums it all up. You know, people aren't getting arrested for smashing up, being vandals, for being violent. This sense of decline. We're forgetting what this country is supposed to be about, what it used to be about, what we remember it was about when we see the VE Day celebrations and remember the greatest ever generation. So, yes, it's about Reform's main raison d'etre, I think, is about saving Britain, saving the Britain that we all knew. Even, you know, I mean, okay, I'm not that young, but I'm not old enough to remember the Second World War. But I grew up in different times.
Well,
we were all little toe rags, but we knew where we stood, and we knew that if we stepped out of line, we'd get arrested, we'd get nicked.
Yeah, even I grew up in different times. I'm not as ancient as you, Methuselah, but even when I look back on my childhood, it seems unrecognisable. When I go home to lovely Gloucester, where I was born and brought up, parts of it, it's just gone. There's no shops in the shopping centre. You walk around the streets and you're like, who are these people? It's just, it breaks my blimmin' heart. It really does. Now, one proposal for getting things back on track is getting all those feckless fatties at school who would rather go on Instagram and dream one day of being Andrew Tate or Bonnie Blue or something utterly depraved and horrific, should instead be doing press-ups in the corner of the field and told to like their country and do a bit of military service. What do you think about that? Is it time to bring the army into schools and say, right, down on the floor, 100 from you, God save the king, and all the rest of it?
Well, look, yes, to reinstill the values we're talking about, by all means. Now, again, talking about my great age, when I first proceeded to grammar school, yes, I passed my 11 plus, unbelievably. Everybody was very surprised, most of all me. When I got to grammar school, all the kids had to sign up for either the Sea Cadets, the Air Cadets, or the Army Cadets. Now, me, being me, you know me, I decided to be a conscientious objector just to cause trouble. So I was like, no, I'm not. So there are about 7 of us in the entire school. And I came to regret that decision, because I spent my entire schoolhood, when the afternoon, one afternoon a week, it would be all the military stuff, you know, and the Air Cadets are going up in gliders and the Sea Cadets are going out in boats and the Army guys are having fun on the assault courses. I'm up on floor 7 with my other conscientious objectors. I spent 7 years sandpapering desks. to get the graffiti off them.
Oh, mate, you should have been in the Air Cadets. That is so cool.
Exactly. It was a wrong decision. So, I applaud that idea. Anything that will teach kids a sense of respect for their elders, for their country, for this culture, has to be a good thing. And let's hope reform go with that, because I think it's a great idea.
I think you're right. What has gone on in our education system is so toxic and so pernicious. All these people go, I wouldn't fight for my country. Oh, the country's racist. Oh, Britain's shameful past. And they don't want to do anything. They don't want to talk to each other. They don't want to leave the house. They don't want to have jobs. Most of 18 to 25-year-olds are barely working. They don't get out of bed for less than 30 grand a year. They want everything handed to them on a silver platter. They worry about whether they've got the right genitalia. And you just think, for God's sakes, for crying out loud, these people need to be gotten hold of and taught from an early age to be normal.
Well, let me tell you, Alex, a lot of the problems we got with, Gen Z and...
you went to grammar school, Kev. It's Gen Z.
Gen Z. Well, no. Hey, I'm an American. You know that. It's the schools. It's the teachers. Yeah. The teachers. Here's another very important thing. Teachers today, most of them sort of left-wing morons, not particularly well-educated, not particularly clever. The only thing they teach their kids is how to be woke and left-wing. But the worst thing they don't teach our younger generations is how to debate in a civilized way, how to accept that there might be people who don't agree with you, who have other opinions. You know what it's like when you talk to a younger person. Well, I don't actually agree with you. They then hit you with a volley of insults. Take a look at social media. So our left-wing, useless, moronic, undereducated teachers, our woke teachers, are churning out generations of kids who've got no values, no understanding of the culture of this country, and no ability to debate in a civilized way. It's the school's fault. It's these idiot teachers' fault. They're all teaching them net zero. They're brilliant. They are politically brainwashing our kids, and they're in no position to brainwash anyone because they've got very small brains.
I couldn't agree more, quite frankly. Bring back military service. I totally agree. Kevin O'Sullivan, always good catching up with you, my darling. Do you know, Kev actually mentioned in all that, this brilliant article, Scuzz Nation. This idea that everything's just fallen apart at the seams, law and order, no social shame. It's all a bit grim out there, and don't we know it? Well, you'll be pleased to know we've got the author of that very article on after the break, so don't go anywhere.
Many of the wars we fought subsequently have been controversial, sometimes actually questionable in terms of their aims. But the men and women who served they were never, very rarely actually, called into question. That idea of a British military uniform and it being the best of the best, that's what we need to work towards, hold on to, never don't question it. We need to always interrogate it. But the day we lose pride in that uniform and that service is a very worrying day indeed, I think, Ian.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, every now and then, somebody coins a term that just feeds perfectly into the public psyche. It's adopted, and then it becomes a set descriptor. Well, I have a feeling that Gus Carter has done just that by describing very colourfully, can I just say, Scuzz Nation. Scuzz Nation looks very much like a country of a few years ago, only worse. It's a place where decay happens faster than repair, where crime largely goes unpunished, where the social fabric has been slashed, graffitied and left by the side of the road. A brilliant article. I'm going to welcome him to the show right now. Gus Carter, Deputy Features Editor at The Spectator. You've really encapsulated, Gus, what a lot of people know is going on. And it's not just in London. It's not just in the sort of, you know, more grimy burbs of big cities. I mean, one of the examples you give here is of a vape shop in Shrewsbury that claimed to have, not a vape shop, a barber's, that claimed to have a £1.8 million turnover. Wherever you live in the country now, you can see that there's a proliferation of crime, of people essentially just taking the proverbial and nothing being done about it. The gradual, it's not even gradual, the rapid degradation of something that we all hold as dear and treasure. Talk to us about Scuzz Nation.
Yeah, well, essentially, and thank you very much for having me on, Alex. What I saw was like a whole load of different processes, a whole load of different examples of how the UK is becoming kind of just a little bit worse in lots of different ways. I find a way of describing that in a simple, easy way to sum up. Recognize, as you said, it's something like 7 in 10 people think that the country is getting worse. When you look at polling on whether or not people are proud of the place that they're from, it's been on the decline for decades. And the reasons for it are quite straightforward, actually. I mean, I spoke to the pollster Luke Trill, who was carrying out polls before the local elections, and he was saying that across the board, everyone he spoke to was saying that the country is effed up and a shambles. And I think it's just something that we all know. So what I was trying to do was tying together some of my experiences of what I call Scuzz Nation, but then also some of the statistics that bear out what we are all witnessing. Yeah, let's talk about some of those statistics. Let's talk about some of the characters as well. The one I'm most fascinated by is Goat Man. You write that in one ward in Runcorn, this is after the recent by-election that Reform snatched Labour's 16th safest seat, and they lost it by just 6 votes. Residents said that there was a neighbour who filled his derelict house with goats and burned the animals' manure in his garden. And despite various people phoning up the authorities, nothing was done. Who is Goat Man? I know, it's an extraordinary story. Basically, I was talking to a Labour campaigner who was up there at the time, and she had been drinking with one of the MPs afterwards, and they were discussing the fact that, you know, they'd lost by so few votes, and if you added up the people that live next door to Goat Man, they may just have clinched it. I think it's such a perfect emblem of what's going wrong in this country. When people do behave in this kind of way, the authorities just seem unable or unwilling to deal with it. Do you know where Goat Man was from by any chance? I don't. I do know that he was somewhere in Runcorn. Yeah, I'd be interested to find out that, because the other thing you talk about here, and I'm sort of going through and looking at some of the highlights, but you speak about the barbershop with the £1 million plus turnover, you know, and 7,000 people. You talk about 1 in 5 Albanians here has been arrested, 1 in 36 is in prison. You also mention a Polish street scammer trying to defraud a member of the public next to Victoria Station. When you called 999, the police couldn't arrive for at least an hour. You also talk about cocaine deaths. And the one thing that I know when I look at
organised crime, the statistics on it, and there's a brilliant website, I don't know if you know it, the Organised Crime Index is brilliant. You should go on it if you don't know it. One thing that's clear is a lot of the organised crime in this country is done by foreign gangs. And I wonder if you've actually made a connection somewhat between mass immigration and what has led to some of the scenes you're describing here.
Yeah, I certainly think in some instances there is certainly a connection. I mean, I quoted the Home Office, which said, and I quote, Albanian gangs act as the main wholesaler to powder cocaine retail operations in the UK. You know, it's something that the government is aware of. Yeah, of course, in situations like that, it is connected to immigration. I used to work in the courts, and I was going back through some of my old copy while I was writing this piece, and I found the case of an Algerian asylum seeker in his teens, and he had been mugging people at knife point in London. And when the police arrested him, they found on his phone a photograph of him wearing a watch of one of the tourists that he'd mugged the night before. But then the police just released him on bail, and guess what he did? He carried on carrying out knife point muggings. You know, it seems unbelievable to normal people that this is how we behave. But this is the reality that Britain, Scuzz nation, has found itself in.
How do we de-scuzz ourselves? That's the big question. I mean, I think it's a loaded question, because I'm sure there's lots of miracles that need to be performed to wind back the clock 10, 20 years and go back to a civilized society where the concept of shame still exists.
Yeah, look, I think it's such a difficult question, because there are so many different parts of our public life and our public institutions that have been degraded. I mean, I think one of the places to start is looking at prisons, right? We've increased our population by millions of people, and the number of prison places simply hasn't caught up. We also have a situation where the courts have longer and longer backlogs, and no one seems to be able to deal with it. So it can come down to quite bureaucratic sounding things like the number of sitting days in courts and making sure that there are enough judges to hear cases. But if we want to deal with issues like this, then we're going to have to deal with the perpetrators.
Yeah, I mean, again, you talk about we've increased our population, done nothing about increasing resources. To me, it does seem to come back to mass migration. And this idea that when people come into this country, and this is by no means all people who come to this country, there'll be plenty of people, probably the majority of people who come to this country, come here for the right reasons, want to integrate, have a huge fondness for Britain. I mean, I think of my own next door neighbours from Turkey, right? They've come to Britain, both brilliant. One's a scientist, one's a doctor. And they came to Britain to have England and put their son through the English education system. And they live in London. They're like, we haven't moved to England. What is this? Even they're disturbed about what they've found in London. And I do wonder how much we need to begin addressing the fact that when people come to this country who don't have our interests at heart, the Albanian criminal gangs and the like, who are here essentially just to be parasitic of our economy and actually profit from crime, that we need to wake up and get real about that. And that would be the first right step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I didn't talk about it that much in this piece, but I mean, my view of this is that it is essentially our problem. It is a problem of our ability to ask people, to encourage people to integrate. You know, as far as I'm aware, we still don't have particularly strict language rules when it comes to people moving to this country. It is a lack of confidence in who we are as a people and what we believe in and what our culture is. So that what happens is we end up with people coming over here, and quite normally, by the way, quite understandably, they stay within the communities that they are from. That's how people feel comfortable. But we need to work harder to make sure that people feel British and feel proud to be British once they've moved here.
It's a tall order after all this time, Gus, but absolutely brilliant article. You're a fantastic writer. So enjoyable talking to you about that. Keep up the good work. That was Gus Carter. Right, we're going to take a short break now. And after the break, a man who I am normally squinting at on the little screen above the camera there to have a conversation with down the line from America is going to be joining me in the studio. Is Adam Coleman, columnist at the New York Post. He's normally given me all of his wise insights into the Donald Trump administration from afar. He's in London and he's going to be in the hot seat after this. Don't go anywhere.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sounds like a deal.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Adam Coleman is here, columnist at the New York Post, who is going around and about the place in the UK. He's been here for a week promoting his new book, which we're going to talk about. But I just said to Adam, right, I said, so how long have you been in? Have you managed to get outside of London? And where have you been? And he said, Swindon. And I'm like, no, Adam, I could have given... Not, like, no offence to Swindonians out there. There are plenty of old towns, quite nice. And I know the Glue Pot. That's a good pub. Sells proper ciders. Great train station as well. Great connections into London. But, you know, it's not really the sort of heart and soul of the English pastoral scene. But there you go. Anyway, we've got you here to talk about the book that you have just written, The Children We Left Behind. What is the premise of this book?
Well, when I started writing for different publications like the New York Post, I would always see like a family connection when it came to like big tragic events, especially like mass shootings, things of that nature. And more often than not, they were always coming from some sort of broken family situation. Recently, we had that big case where the homeless man was choked on the subway. After the man who had choked him, he was restraining him, they found him not guilty. The father's coming out and saying, we need to do better. And my response in the Post was, where were you this entire time? Because you weren't involved in his life. You know, that man, while he was a menace as an adult, he had to deal with the murder of his mother by his stepfather, you know, and being left behind essentially to go into the foster care system to end up in the streets. So while these examples are like the extreme cases, the issue of family separation is actually just growing. And I think it has a lot to do with adult individualism, where they want to do the thing they want to do, everybody rationalizing their choices, and so no one becomes accountable. And so if I only think about me, you know, if I say, if I'm happy, my children will be happy, well then what happens to the kids? Well, the kids get dragged along to their adult whims, and nobody thinks about what's going to happen to those kids.
It's amazing. We've spoken about, in the UK, and I'm sure in America too, the impact of coming from families, particularly without fathers, and how there is statistical correlation between kids who are brought up without a dad in their lives and who enter things like the world of crime. And this speaks very closely to me because, you know, my biological father upped and left when I was a baby and cut all ties. Just nothing. Went off. Big kid himself, basically. I don't have many pleasant words to say about him, and I don't care about saying that on air. But I'm really lucky that my mum remarried when I was 5, a man who I called Dad, who's been a brilliant father figure. And so guess what? I'm not tooling around with zombie knives killing people. But you are right that there has been a normalisation of this and this push towards adult individualism. You now have, more than anything, there's this problem out there, right, with men who don't want to have children or leave it really late because, oh, guess what? It means some sense of sacrifice. They don't seem to be driven by this desire to be a father, the desire to sort of continue the family line. They're instead more worried about, oh, it's going to be too hard. I don't want to make the sacrifice. And so what you've got increasingly, a load of women going it alone. This cannot be good. What has gone wrong? How do we get society back into the sort of the idea that the pronatalist idea, you know, this idea that actually we're on earth to procreate, to be mums and dads, and that is so fulfilling.
Well, I do think that for many people, whether it's men or women who have this low regard to procreating and having a family, a lot of that comes from fear about how they grew up. Many of them grew up in dysfunctional homes. Like, I can't tell you how many times I hear somebody sound like they don't want to get married, but the reasons why come from a place of fear. And it's very specific examples, and it's because they saw it at their house. They saw their dad being physically abusive or verbally abusive, or they saw their mom being manipulative. They saw divorce. They saw all the dysfunction when they were growing up. And so that is a sense of fear for them because they're afraid that they're going to repeat the very thing that they grew up in. So I think that's what a lot of that comes from. And so that's where, for example, in the United States, they tell a lot of women, you know, don't rely on a man. But a lot of that comes from, they've seen examples where they relied on a man and he was abusive or he controlled the money, he did whatever he wanted to do. And the mother tells the child, don't be like me. And so that child grows up in fear, to do everything to further a career, which is fine if she wants to. But she wants to further a career because she's afraid of that thing that deep down inside she actually does want.
What is the solution to all of this, though? You know, how do we sort of set things back on track? I mean, I think there's a sort of degradation when it comes to this idea of social shame. Once upon a time, if you were 41 years old and you weren't married or kids, people would think you're a bit weird. It would be embarrassing. People would be like, oh, there he goes, funny old Jeff there, never got married, never had children. Whereas now it's something that men sort of celebrate, their freedom, their independence. And same with women, you know, I think there's also been a lot of attacking men and putting the blame on men, and women saying, I can do it all, I can have it all, I don't need you. Do you think a lot of this equally comes down to the fact that gender roles have been demonised? This whole idea that women is in charge of hearth and home and man goes out and is the breadwinner?
Well, I think the gender roles have been mixed and matched whenever it suits somebody. So, for example, I do think that for many of the very strong feminist types, they believe that as long as I work, then I don't need him. So what they're actually doing is minimizing his role as a man and as a father within the home. So the man, and a lot of men believe this too, this is part of the problem, it gets in the culture. A lot of men think that their only role in the house is to make money. That's it. And I can tell you as a father to a now 19-year-old that I provide far more than just money for him. Like, you don't care about that. You know, even the richest man in the world, Elon, struggles with his kids.
How many has he got, Lord knows?
Exactly, because he's made a whole bunch of reckless choices. But even the richest man in the world can't buy the one thing that's really important to children, and it's time.
Yeah.
You know, the kids need your time. They need to learn things from you. They need to see, especially for young men, they need to see a model. How do I become a man? And to see that man, and a successful man, and a healthy man. And then on top of that, how does he interact with women, right? That teaches me about relationships. So there are all these lessons that are missed from young men, and they're not getting that because, well, the father wants to be reckless and go around the world and spread his seed, in the case of someone like Elon. But just regular old guys, if they struggle economically, they think that their worth is putrid.
I want to ask you something. I don't know if you sort of touched on this. I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, and I'm blooming well looking forward to. Do you think there's a role for religion to play in all of this? Because when you look at demographic change, you know, I had an interesting interview with a prominent Muslim influencer, and he said, look, don't blame us for having more kids than you. We still believe in that in our culture. You guys are the ones who have abandoned all that, and we would love to see you guys re-embracing Christianity. What sort of role? I mean, we've now got the first American Pope. What sort of role might a sort of resurgence of faith have in changing things?
It was very interesting because I do have my testimony to Christ in there. I was baptized last year. But decades of coming to that point and being agnostic and coming to finding Christ. And I realized I watched a lot of testimonies of people coming to Christ online. Almost every single one of them starts off where they maybe went to church when they were young, or maybe they were finding God, and then all types of family separation issues, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. But that childhood trauma kept them away from God. And it took them a long time to come to God. And these are the ones who finally did. Many of them don't. So I do think the family element actually prevents us from going towards religion, towards faith, because we always end up to that same question. If God loves us so much, why couldn't he make my father stay? You know, you start blaming God for all the things that your parents are doing wrong. Why isn't God here to protect me from my feelings? And I went through that when I was a kid. Where is God when I went into a mental hospital at the age of 8? You know, where was he to protect me? And so all these the blaming and the questions, is God even real? These were the questions I had from when I was a kid into my 30s, essentially.
Oh, and well done. I mean, I love the fact that you were baptized. Was it last year?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. That's a wonderful, wonderful story. Wonderful to hear that. You've been in Britain now for a week. One thing that Brits find fascinating is what Americans think of us. I mean, you know, it seems to me we've got people in the White House, particularly JD Vance, who's like, up yours Europe, can't stick you guys, you don't stand on your own 2 feet, you leech off you parasitic useless continent. But the bond between America and Britain is so much stronger. You know, when you look at the amount we share, I mean, I kind of can barely tell the difference sometimes if I'm listening to a piece of music, if it's American or British. But when you're over here in Britain, you've been mingling with all of us. What have been your take-homes? When you go back to America and you're speaking to your family, so what was it like over there in Blighty? What are you going to tell them?
Well, granted, I've only been in London. So London, in many ways, reminds me of New York, but cleaner.
Blimey, that really?
Yeah, New York is pretty bad. I would say, in many ways, polite on the surface. New Yorkers are rougher, but when you get to know them, they're polite. So there are a lot of similarities. The thing that always comes up, especially engaging in political discussions, is freedom of speech. That's been a big topic. And what's been fascinating, I can't remember his name, was it Adnan, one of the MPs, who's been going on and on about you shouldn't be allowed to say these things.
Yeah, basically wants to bring in Islamophobia, burning Qurans, all of that.
Right. And my response is, and then at the same time saying, we have freedom of speech. And it's like, clearly you don't. Because the Americans understand what freedom of speech is. You get to insult people, you get to say whatever you want to say, as long as you don't threaten someone, you're good to go. So this idea of having a nanny state to protect someone's feelings because a bad word was said, while I don't agree with the bad word or insulting people, unless they really deserve it in my opinion, but I don't necessarily agree with it, that shouldn't be enforced by the police. You shouldn't be arrested and gone to jail for it. That is what freedom of speech is. So I do think you have people like him who don't fully understand what freedom of speech is. Of course we have freedom of speech, except you can't say this and this and this. Like, clearly you don't.
Oh, he knows, he knows what he's doing, that one. But it's interesting, because I was thinking this argument about freedom of speech. We were going, oh, it needs to be protected. You can't just say this and that and that. And I'm like, no, you should be able to. But actually, what I would push back on is some of the absolute dangerous stuff that is being taught to kids in schools.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to control freedom of speech anyway, it's in the classroom. You shouldn't have kids being taught that you can be one of 72 different genders. Or if you want to identify as a, cat, then so be it. It's all gone topsy-turvy, and I get the impression that we've imported a lot of this stuff from America.
You're welcome.
We have. Frankly, we have. And we always seem to be about, 5-10 years behind you. If you want to know what's going to happen in the UK next, see what's happening in America. And I'm quite hopeful, actually. There seems to be something taking place in America, which is a resurgence of social traditionalism. Am I right in that, do you think?
Yes. And it's because we've swung too far left on many things. And on top of that, we had this very strong trend of doing radical left-wing things. Even for me, at one point, I was a moderate Democrat. And even for me, that was like, this is crazy. This is extreme. Obviously, we know what men and women are. Like, this was never a question. And all of a sudden, of course it's a question. And we're getting all this stuff that went just too far left. And now we're trying to find our equilibrium, as far as people, politically, and even just socially. Now people feel more comfortable because the trend is dying off. Everyone's sick of it. Even corporations are dropping DEI, which I like to famously say I predicted. Everybody's moving away from this radical position that everyone has this deep-seated hatred. No one likes each other. There's this race war. If you just thought of America as online, you would think that the race war is coming around the corner, and it's not. All this stuff is contrived. So I do think that there is a resurgence. There are people who are getting off the computer. We're getting more normal conversations that are happening. So I'm actually relatively optimistic.
Are you not worried though? Because, talking about things like the normalisation of broken homes and things like that, that actually the younger generation, not too worried about the kids in high school, weirdly, because they seem to be getting their, some sort of interesting views from TikTok and seem to be kind of right-wing and wanting, like crying out for traditionalism. But the leaders of tomorrow, kind of our generation and a bit younger, are the ones who have been brought up with all this mad indoctrination. And what's that going to mean in 10 years' time when the kids have sort of come through the university system about now and are going into the workplace, who have been radicalised by this sort of loony left-wingery, then become our future leaders? Do you have any fears for them?
No, because those young people will be voters. So at the end of the day, the voters, there's going to be a social dynamic, because when it comes to social issues, they start first and then it leaks into politics. We didn't start with should men be in women's sports and stuff like that first. It became a social issue, and then people wanted to legislate off of it. So I actually am relatively optimistic about Gen Z You know, my son, I believe he voted for Trump. This was his first election that he could vote. You know, and his other friends are much of the same. I think the reason why they're looking more towards traditionalism is because they've seen many of their parents just kind of be so open, and it feels like no one cares about which direction that they go, and no one's thinking about their future. You know, we have all these boomers, which not necessarily a shot at boomers, but we have all these radicalized liberal boomers who are out there protesting because the stock market went down for a couple of days and blaming Elon and Trump. Meanwhile, you have young Gen Z, you have older millennials who still can't afford to buy a house. You know, and it seems very lopsided as far as, do these people actually care about the future? Meanwhile, they're the ones who are in power right now. So, especially in the Democratic Party, it's become old, cruddy, and no one cares about them. And the Republican Party has actually gotten younger. And that has actually shocked me. If you told me 10 years ago that would be the case, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, it is. It's funny, isn't it? I remember predicting the social dynamic would change. You can only stretch an elastic band so far before it pings back. And I think we're kind of beginning to ping back a bit. Now, before I let you go, Adam, it's been so inspirational talking to you. Send a message out there to any young men, especially, that might be listening to this. And what life advice, in a nutshell, would you give them?
Whew.
I know it's a big one.
That there's no job, there's no award that I've ever received that has been greater than raising a happy and healthy young man. That there's so much joy and beauty in raising a child, that for them to miss out on it because of some fear, some irrational fear, or because what they saw on the internet, or some distant relationship that didn't work out, I would hate for them to miss out on that opportunity.
That's beautiful. Adam, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
And, well, hopefully next time you're back in Britain, let me be your tour guide.
You got it.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. His book, The Children We Left Behind. I'm sure you can find it on all good book vendors. And a wonderful man, Adam, is as well. A privilege to have him join us in the studio today. Now, after the break, we're going to be taking your calls and reading your messages. So the number, if you want to get involved on anything we've been talking about today, it's the final hurrah where your voice matters. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to be patched through to the studio, charged at your normal network rates. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message. Text me 87222, put talk before your message. I'm back after this.
This is not a trade deal, it is an alleviation of some of the tariffs, especially on steel and cars.
Yeah.
So steel and cars are back down to 10%, and steel and aluminium's on 0. Everything else is still paying those extra tariffs.
And also,
so this isn't a deal.
Much
it's
to be discussed,
relief.
isn't it? Like the pharmaceutical stuff is still to be discussed.
Yeah.
Lots of other things still to be discussed.
Yeah, and we're worse off because we're having to take... So there's a manufactured crisis here by Trump. Long-term tactics aside, this is a manufactured crisis for which we've got a partial redemption, and we've given the Americans some stuff in return.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, well, before I let you guys go for the day and drag my producer Ted and maybe even Alicia and Tech Up and everybody else over to the cider house for a few pre-weekend bevies, it'd be remiss of me not to tell you how you could win tickets to the Champions League final plus 5,000 quid to spend on beer. Here's how.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win all of that, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May at 11 p.m. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Champions League final competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, there you go. Viel Glück, as they would say in Germany, which apparently means good luck. And yes, I did have to look that up on Google Translate. Right, let's hit up the phone lines. Yvonne in Perthshire is waiting. Hi there, Yvonne.
Hello, Alex. Hi.
Hello, my love.
You. Hi. And can I just say, I love your programme. I love you all, but I really love your programme. And
thanks.
It's so great.
Give me a big head.
So I was just listening before the break to your discussion with the guy that was there. I can't remember
With
his
Adam,
name.
wonderful Adam.
Yeah, and I just thought I've got to ring in because I just do have a few comments. So, you know, I don't think religion is needed. You know, it may help some. This is when you're bringing up children alone, of which I've done for a very long time. The youngest is now 25, had 3 children, two from a marriage and one kind of an oops baby, if you like. So totally on my own with that one, who I had at 39. And, you know, you just need a degree of selflessness, and I think that's what's lacking. For me, it was all about the children. I didn't have a great upbringing, very complicated, so I could have gone the other way, but I was just so focused on that. And given that my, let's say an atheist is maybe too strong, but you know, I'm kind of like the scientific enlightenment, not a god, really. So for me, you know, success in life is measured by how well your children are doing. You know, are they happy? Are they fulfilled? Are they hardworking? Are they self-supporting? Yes, yes, yes.
Oh,
Yvonne. And it's been hard. You know, it's been very hard. I've sort of sacrificed my sort of personal, you know, life in a way. But on the other hand, I've had a really fulfilled life, and yeah, they're doing really great. So,
I mean, congratulations to you, because in these circumstances, when a woman brings up kids alone, and they have to be both the mother, the father. I mean, I've seen my own mum. You know, I said my mum remarried when I was 5 years old. She did. My dad's amazing. I love him to bits. But he worked away from home quite a lot. He was a lorry driver. And so my mum really was sort of doing a lot of grunt work by herself. And what a fantastically strong woman she is too. They don't make many like you, Yvonne. I can tell you that much.
Well, I'm a bit of an oddity because I'm a professional single working mother, or was. And that added a whole other layer of complication. But, you know, I kind of look back and I did it. But I just think, you know, what's lacking is that people are so self-focused, and
this is it, Yvonne. It can be done. I think this is the problem. I think there's too many people who think that, you know, everything's too difficult and everything's impossible, and really it isn't. Yvonne in Perthshire, what a wonderful call. Thank you ever so much. Ian Collins is here. We're having kind of an emotion talk about,
are you really?
Yeah, kids, single parents, broken homes, that kind of thing. And you know, it strikes me. I was just thinking there as Yvonne was talking that you know, it's VE Day yesterday, and the amount of women who had to stay at home and look after the kids and you know, in the war effort, do everything, be the man about the house, be the mother, work in the munitions factories, and the men were out on the front line. And yet this generation was so optimistic and positive and actually seemed to sort of generate a very comfortable generation after them, the boomers. And you have to ask yourself, what has gone so wrong in modern society that people are just terrified of their own capabilities?
It's weird. We talked about it a bit yesterday, that whole generational thing of something happened at that. Obviously, there's a big war taking place that naturally provokes a sort of collectivist kind of mentality among people looking at those women, mostly women that were at home. Not only some were looking after kids, others were worried about their son or their husband who were out on the front line or whatever they were doing. I mean, all of that going on as well. Imagine the thinking of that. We talk about PTSD and stuff like that today, and yet juggling the whole thing almost with no money as well.